Hello and thank you for joining for tonight's stories. I hope you enjoy. The Devil You Know. A Wendigo horror story. The jukebox in the Roadhouse Saloon played Ramblin' Man, just loud enough to drown out the ringing in Jenna Bowen's ears. It wasn't the good kind of loud, the kind that filled a room with warmth and human connection. This was the desperate loud of a dying establishment, the volume cranked to mask the emptiness of cracked vinyl booths and the bartender's thousand-yard stare. Jenna sat in the corner booth where the light didn't reach, her back to the wall because some habits survived retirement. The amber liquid in her glass caught what little illumination filtered through the nicotine-stained windows, turning the bourbon into something that looked like liquid copper. She swirled it with her right hand, watching the legs slide down the glass with the patience of a woman who had nowhere else to be. Her left hand rested on the table, palm down, two fingers missing. The stumps had healed into smooth pink scars, courtesy of an army surgeon who hadn't asked questions and hadn't met her eyes. That was 5 years ago. The phantom pain remained, ghost fingers that itched and burned in weather changes, in moments of stress, in the small hours of the morning when sleep wouldn't come. Sometimes she woke to find herself reaching for things with fingers that no longer existed, grasping at air with the muscle memory of loss. The Allman Brothers gave way to something slower, something about hardtake and highways. Jenna didn't recognize the song, but she recognized the sentiment. She'd been driving these Montana backroads for 3 weeks now, sleeping in motels that charged by the hour and smelled like industrial cleaner and despair, eating at diners where the coffee tasted like it had been brewed during the Reagan administration. She was running from something. She knew it. The bartender knew it. The 3 other patrons scattered through the roadhouse knew it too, though they kept their eyes carefully averted from the woman with the ruined hand and the 1,000-yard stare to match the bartender's. The Opal Creek incident. That's what the files called it. That's what the debriefings had labeled it, what the psychologists had circled and underlined in their reports, what the compensation paperwork had cited in its dry legal language. Incident. Like it was a traffic accident. Like it was a training exercise gone wrong. Like it hadn't been. Jenna knocked back the bourbon. It burned going down and she welcomed the sensation. Physical pain was honest. Physical pain didn't lie to you about what it was. She signaled for another. The bartender, a heavy-set man with a walrus mustache and the defeated posture of someone who'd seen too many lives unravel on his watch, brought the bottle to her table rather than pouring another glass. He set it down with a thunk that spoke of finality. "On the house," he said, "you look like you need it more than I need the money." Jenna almost smiled, almost thanks. "Don't thank me, thank the general." The words didn't register immediately. Jenna's hand was already reaching for the bottle, her mind already sliding back toward the darkness of Opal Creek, toward the thing that had taken her fingers and her sanity and 7 other lives. But then the booth's other bench creaked, and the air changed, became charged with the particular electricity of command, of authority that didn't need to announce itself. General Miriam Voss slid into the seat across from Jenna like she'd been expected, like she'd been invited, like the past 5 years hadn't happened, like they were still in the briefing room at Fort Meade, like Jenna still wore the uniform and the rank and the carefully constructed armor of military discipline. "Major Bowen," Voss said. Her voice hadn't changed, smoky, measured, the kind of voice that could deliver orders or condolences with equal precision. "You're a hard woman to find." "I'm retired, General. That means I don't have to be found." Voss smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Those were the same eyes Jenna remembered, pale blue, calculating, the eyes of a woman who'd risen through the ranks of an institution not known for welcoming women by being smarter and tougher than everyone around her. The eyes of a woman who'd sent people to die and learned to sleep afterward. "You're still on the reserve list," Voss said. "You know that. The medical discharge was administrative for your protection." "My protection?" Jenna laughed, and it sounded like gravel in a blender. That's rich. The general reached into her coat, expensive, civilian, but cut with military precision, and withdrew a manila folder. She slid it across the table with 2 fingers, the way you might slide a photograph of a loved one you were trying to forget. The folder was thin, military issue, stamped with classification markings that made Jenna's stomach clench. "Don't," Jenna said. "You need to see this." "I don't need to see anything. I need to drink this bourbon and pretend that the world makes sense. I need to sleep through the night without waking up screaming. I need—" Her voice cracked and she hated herself for it. "I need my fingers back, General. Can you give me those?" Voss didn't flinch. She'd seen worse, Jenna knew. They all had. But there was something in her expression now, something that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Fear, maybe, or its military equivalent, concern for operational security. "Open the folder, Jenna." The use of her first name was a violation of protocol. It was also, Jenna realized, a kindness. A bridge across the gulf of rank and time and trauma that separated them. She reached for the folder with her good hand, the one that still had all its digits, and flipped it open. The first photograph hit her like a physical blow. She'd seen death before. She'd seen it in combat, in training accidents, in the aftermath of IEDs and mortar strikes, and the 1,000 stupid ways that young men and women found to end their lives in service to something larger than themselves. She'd seen bodies burned, and bodies frozen, and bodies so thoroughly destroyed that only dental records could identify them. She'd never seen anything like this. The soldier in the photograph, she could tell it was a soldier by the remnants of the uniform. The ACU pattern visible beneath the blood had been opened like a biology textbook. Not cut, not stabbed, opened. The ribcage splayed outward, the organs arranged in a pattern that might have been deliberate or might have been the result of something simply rummaging. The face was intact, frozen in an expression of such profound terror that Jenna had to look away. "Sergeant First Class David Okonkwo," Voss said quietly. 42 years old, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Syria. Survived an IED that killed 3 of his squad mates. Didn't survive a training exercise in the Bitterroot Range. Jenna's hand was shaking. She gripped the edge of the table to stop it. Training exercise. "That's what the report says." "The report is lying." Voss reached across the table and turned the photograph. Beneath it was another, then another. 7 photographs in total, each showing the same pattern of destruction, the same impossible violence, the same look of transcendent horror on faces that had seen combat and survived it. "The wounds match Opal Creek," Voss said. "Same thermal signatures, same." Laughter. The word hung in the air between them, heavier than the cigarette smoke and the smell of spilled beer. Laughter. Jenna remembered that sound. She heard it still in the small hours when the bourbon wasn't enough and the sleeping pills weren't enough, and the only thing that remained was the memory of that sound. High and thin and utterly inhuman, like metal scraping against metal, like the wind screaming through a canyon that shouldn't exist. "It's back," Voss said. Jenna closed the folder. Her hands were steady now, the steadiness of shock, of the body protecting itself from information it couldn't process. "It was never gone. We just stopped looking for it." "We need you, Jenna. You need bait." Voss didn't deny it. That was something, at least. "We need someone who survived, someone who knows what we're dealing with. The new team, they're good soldiers, but they're not prepared for this. They don't even know what this is." "And you think I can prepare them? In what, a day, a week? I spent 6 months studying every piece of literature, every Native American legend, every scientific paper on cryptids and mass hysteria and shared hallucination. I learned Dine Bizod from a tape recorder in a basement at Langley, and none of it prepared me for what I saw in that forest. None of it prepared me for—" She stopped, her hand unconsciously going to her missing fingers. "For what it did to us. That's why we need you." Voss leaned forward, and for the first time Jenna saw the cracks in her composure, The dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. Something's changed, Jenna. The thing at Opal Creek, it was contained, isolated, we thought. We thought if we left it alone, if we kept people away, it would stay there, stay dormant. But now it's hunting again, and it's not just hunting in the exclusion zone anymore. Jenna felt the familiar cold settling into her chest, the cold that had never really left since Opal Creek. How far has it ranged? The Okonkwo kill was 40 miles from the original site. Voss paused. The last one was 70. 70 miles. The number echoed in Jenna's mind like a death knell. Whatever had kept the creature bound to Opal Creek, territoriality, ritual, simple preference, was no longer holding. It was learning. It was expanding. It was hungry. When do we leave? Jenna heard herself ask. Voss's relief was palpable, though she tried to hide it. There's a car outside. We can be at Fort Brenner by midnight. Jenna looked at the bourbon bottle, still 3/4 full. She thought about the life she'd been trying to build, the motels and the diners and the long drives that led nowhere because nowhere was safer than somewhere, safer than staying still long enough for the memories to catch up. She thought about the thing in the forest. The thing with the backward-bending knees and the too long arms and the eyes that weren't eyes at all, but windows into something older and hungrier than human comprehension. She thought about the 7 soldiers in the photographs, about the families who would receive folded flags and carefully worded condolences and lies about training accidents, about the next 7 and the 7 after that if someone didn't stop it. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. Voss nodded and slid out of the booth, leaving the folder on the table. Jenna didn't open it again. She didn't need to. The images were burned into her memory now, added to the gallery of horrors that already occupied the space where normal people kept vacation photos and pictures of loved ones. She finished her drink, one last swallow of liquid courage that wouldn't be enough, that could never be enough, and stood. Her legs were steady. Her hands were steady. Inside she was screaming, but she'd learned to keep that internal, to wear the mask of competence that the military had forged in her. The jukebox had moved on to something else, something about taking it easy. Jenna walked past it, past the bartender who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the other patrons who suddenly found their drinks fascinating. She pushed through the door into the Montana night, where a black SUV waited with its engine running, where General Voss sat in the back seat with the patience of a woman who'd learned that some things couldn't be rushed. Jenna climbed in. The door closed with the finality of a coffin lid. "Tell me about the new team," she said as the SUV pulled onto the highway. Voss handed her another folder, thinner this time, personnel files rather than crime scene photos. Sergeant Diego Ruiz, EOD Specialist, 2-tour, Bronze Star with V device. He's confident. Confident isn't a virtue in this line of work. No, but he's also the best at what he does. If anyone can rig the trap you designed, it's him. Voss paused. Corpsman Thomas Nguyen, combat medic, 3-tour, Purple Heart, quiet, keeps to himself. But he's seen things, Afghanistan, the kind of things that don't make it into after-action reports. He won't panic. And the officer? Second Lieutenant Marcus Calloway, West Point, top of his class, fast-tracked for command. Voss's tone suggested reservations. He's inexperienced, but he's also the reason we have the funding for this operation. His father is Senator Calloway, chair of the Armed Services Committee. Jenna closed the folder. You put a politician's son on a Wendigo hunt. I didn't put him anywhere. He requested the assignment. Apparently, he's interested in anomalous phenomena. Has a whole library of books on the subject. Thinks this is his chance to prove himself. He's going to die. Not if you can help it. Voss turned to look at her, and in the passing headlights of oncoming traffic, her face was a mask of shadows. You're the only one who's faced this thing and lived, Jenna. The only one who knows what it wants, how it thinks, how it hunts. If anyone can keep them alive, it's you. Jenna stared out the window at the darkness rushing past. The Montana landscape was invisible now, reduced to the occasional silhouette of a tree or the distant glow of a ranch house. She thought about the trap she designed 5 years ago, the one that had never been tested because the thing had been too smart, too fast, too utterly alien to be caught by human ingenuity. She thought about the Navajo silverwork she'd commissioned from a medicine man who'd refused to touch the designs once he understood their purpose. "You don't trap a spirit with metal and electricity," he'd said. "You only make it angry." The medicine man had been right. The thing at Opal Creek had been angry. It was still angry, and now it was hunting again. "The trap won't work," Jenna said quietly. "Then we'll build a better one." Voss's voice was firm, the voice of a woman who'd never accepted defeat. "You have resources now, Jenna, funding, personnel, whatever you need. Just tell me what it takes to kill this thing." Jenna turned to face her. "You don't kill it, General. You don't even hurt it. The best you can hope for is to annoy it enough that it goes somewhere else. And even that," she shook her head, "even that might not be possible anymore. If it's ranging 70 miles from its territory, if it's hunting soldiers instead of civilians." "Then what?" "Then it's evolving." Jenna's voice was barely audible over the hum of the tires on asphalt. "And evolution is always dangerous." The SUV drove on into the night, carrying them toward Fort Brenner and whatever waited there. Jenna closed her eyes and tried not to remember the sound of laughter in the dark, the smell of ozone and rotting meat, the feeling of fingers being removed one by one while something watched with eyes that weren't eyes at all. She tried not to remember. She failed. The darkness outside the window seemed to press closer, hungry and waiting. And somewhere in the forests of Montana, something that shouldn't exist was laughing. Fort Brenner Research Base didn't appear on any map that Jenna had ever seen, official or otherwise. The SUV turned off the highway onto a dirt road that wound through hills covered in pine and shadow, the headlights cutting through darkness so complete it felt like a physical substance. They passed through 2 checkpoints, both unmanned, both equipped with cameras that tracked their progress with the cold patience of mechanical eyes, before the base itself emerged from the forest like a bad dream. It wasn't large. That was the first thing Jenna noticed. Whatever black-budget funding had been allocated to this operation, it hadn't been spent on infrastructure. The base consisted of 3 prefabricated buildings arranged around a central courtyard, all of them painted the same industrial gray that seemed designed to blend into the Montana sky on overcast days. A chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded the compound, and beyond that the forest pressed close. Too close, Jenna thought, the trees leaning inward like spectators at an execution. The SUV stopped in front of the largest building. A sign beside the door read "Administration" in letters that had already begun to peel. Jenna climbed out, her legs stiff from the hours of driving, and stretched her back with the careful movements of someone who'd learned to respect the limitations of a body that had been through too much. The air smelled wrong. That was the second thing she noticed. It wasn't just the standard military-based smell of diesel fuel and industrial cleaner, and the faint, persistent odor of latrines that never quite worked properly. There was something else underneath it, something that reminded Jenna of Opal Creek, the smell of wet stone and rotting vegetation, and the metallic tang that preceded thunderstorms. The smell of a place where the veil between worlds wore thin. "We're in the exclusion zone," she said. Voss had emerged from the other side of the SUV, her posture unchanged by the long drive. 20 miles from the original site, close enough for rapid response, far enough for containment. "There's no containing this thing, General, you know that." "I know that we have to try." Voss started toward the building, and Jenna followed, her boots crunching on gravel that sounded too loud in the night air. "The team is waiting inside. I'd like you to meet them before we brief on the operation." The interior of the building was as utilitarian as the exterior. Fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered, linoleum floors that had seen too many boots. walls painted the same institutional beige that seemed to exist in every military facility Jenna had ever visited. But there were differences, too. The doors were reinforced steel, equipped with biometric scanners. The windows were narrow, covered with wire mesh, and the air conditioning was running full blast, filling the space with a chill that had nothing to do with the Montana night. "We keep it cold," Voss explained, noting Jenna's glance at the thermostat. "The thing at Opal Creek, it shows up on thermal imaging. Cold spots, usually, we thought. If the ambient temperature is low enough, we might get better readings. Or it might just make it harder to tell when it's coming." Voss didn't answer. She led Jenna down a corridor lined with doors that all looked the same, all numbered with the same utilitarian font, all leading to rooms that probably held secrets Jenna didn't want to know. At the end of the corridor, a set of double doors opened into what had been designated as the briefing room. 3 people looked up as they entered. Sergeant Diego Ruiz was the first to register. He sat at the conference table with his chair tilted back, boots propped on the polished surface in a posture that managed to be simultaneously relaxed and alert. He was younger than Jenna had expected, maybe 25, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if it weren't for the scar that ran from his left temple to his jawline. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently fixed on Jenna with the assessing gaze of someone who'd learned to size up threats quickly. "The famous Major Bowen," he said, not removing his feet from the table. "I was starting to think you were a myth, like Bigfoot or competent leadership." "Sergeant Ruiz," Voss's voice carried a warning, "show some respect." "Just breaking the ice, General," Ruiz smiled, and it transformed his face, not into something friendly but into something sharp and dangerous. "Major, I've read your file. All the parts that weren't blacked out anyway. Impressive stuff, especially the part where you lost 2 fingers to." "That's enough." The voice came from the corner, quiet but firm. Corpsman Thomas Nguyen sat with his back to the wall. Jenna noted the positioning, the way his eyes tracked every entrance and exit, his hands folded in his lap like he was praying. He was smaller than Ruiz, wiry where the sergeant was muscular, with the kind of stillness that Jenna associated with predators waiting for the right moment to strike. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, dark and depthless, held knowledge that Jenna recognized. The look of someone who'd seen the other side of the veil and come back changed. "The corpsman is right," said the third member of the team, rising from his seat with the awkward formality of someone who'd learned their manners from a manual. Second Lieutenant Marcus Calloway was everything his file had suggested: young, clean-cut, with the kind of earnest expression that Jenna associated with recruits who hadn't yet learned that the world was darker than their training had prepared them for. His uniform was crisp, his posture perfect, his handshake when he extended his hand firm but not crushing. "Lieutenant Calloway, it's an honor to meet you, Major. Your service at Opal Creek, your sacrifice, it's an inspiration." Jenna looked at his hand for a moment before taking it. The fingers were soft, uncalloused. The hand of someone who'd spent more time in classrooms than in combat. "It's just Jenna now, Lieutenant. I'm retired." "Of course, Jenna," he smiled, and it was the smile of a politician's son, practiced and sincere and utterly meaningless. "I want you to know that I've studied everything available about the Opal Creek incident, the official reports, the eyewitness accounts, the alternative theories. I consider myself something of an expert on anomalous phenomena." "An expert," Jenna kept her voice neutral. "Well, perhaps expert is too strong, but I've read extensively. Cryptozoology, paranormal research, Native American folklore. I even took a course in Dine Bizot at West Point, basic conversational, nothing advanced, but enough to understand the foundational texts." He paused, clearly expecting praise. "I believe that with proper preparation and the right equipment, we can not only contain the entity at Opal Creek but actually communicate with it, establish a dialogue." Jenna looked at Voss. The general's expression was carefully blank, but Jenna could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand hovered near her sidearm. "You didn't tell him," Jenna said. "Tell me what?" Calloway's smile faltered. "It doesn't communicate, Lieutenant. It doesn't negotiate. It hunts and it feeds and it laughs while it does both. The only reason I'm standing here is because I was faster than the others. Not smarter, not better prepared, just faster." The room went silent. Ruiz had lowered his feet from the table, his posture suddenly alert. Nguyen hadn't moved, but his eyes had narrowed slightly, the only sign that he was paying attention. Calloway's face had gone pale, the politician's mask slipping to reveal something younger and more vulnerable underneath. "But the research," he said, "the legends. The Wendigo is a spirit of hunger, yes, but also of transformation. If we could understand what it wants." "It wants to eat." Jenna's voice was flat, final. "That's all. Everything else. The transformation, the legends, the spiritual significance, that's human projection. We look at something that shouldn't exist and we try to make it make sense. But it doesn't make sense, Lieutenant. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't have motivations that we can understand. It's just hungry." She turned to Voss. "You said I had resources. I need to see them now." The general nodded and led her from the briefing room, leaving the three soldiers to process what they'd heard. Jenna didn't look back. She couldn't afford to care about their feelings, about their preparation or lack thereof. She had a job to do, and she needed to know if the tools existed to do it. The equipment room was in the second building, accessible only through a retinal scanner that Voss activated with a lean toward the camera. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a space that was larger than it appeared from the outside. Someone had excavated underground, Jenna realized, creating a bunker that wouldn't appear on any satellite imagery. The contents of the room were impressive. Against one wall, a cage made of steel bars thick as a man's wrist stood open, its interior lined with something that glinted silver in the overhead lights. Navajo silverwork, intricate patterns of lightning and thunderbirds, of protective symbols that predated European contact. Jenna recognized the designs from her research, from the medicine man who'd refused to touch them once he understood their purpose. "You got the silver," she said. "From the same source you used. He wasn't happy about it, but he took the money." Voss walked to the cage and ran her hand along one of the bars. "The lining is pure silver melted down from ceremonial objects. The bars themselves are steel reinforced with tungsten carbide. The floor is electrified, 50,000 volts adjustable. The whole thing is on wheels so we can transport it once, if we capture the target." Jenna examined the cage more closely. The workmanship was good, military good, precise and functional, but she could see the flaws. The silver lining was patchy in places, the patterns interrupted by the practical necessities of construction. The electrified floor had gaps where the current might not flow consistently, and the wheels, while practical for transport, meant that the cage could be moved. The thing at Opal Creek liked to move things. "It's a start," she said. "There's more." Voss led her to a workbench covered with electronic equipment, speakers and amplifiers and generators, all connected by a web of cables that looked like the nervous system of some mechanical beast. "Audio equipment. You mentioned in your report that the thing responded to certain frequencies." "It responded to its own hunting cry. When we played back recordings of the sounds it made, it investigated. So we use it as bait. We use it as a distraction." Jenna picked up one of the speakers, testing its weight. "The thing is fast, General, faster than anything that size should be. If it wants to kill you, it will, unless you give it a reason to hesitate. And the recordings will make it hesitate. They'll make it curious." Jenna set the speaker down. "Curiosity is the only thing that slows it down. The only time I saw it stop, really stop, was when it heard something it didn't recognize, something that challenged its understanding of the territory." Voss nodded, making notes on a tablet she produced from her coat. What else? Weapons. Standard issue for all personnel. M4 carbines, sidearms, combat knives, plus experimental ordnance, incendiary rounds, silver-tipped ammunition, sonic disruptors. None of it will work. Jenna. I'm not being defeatist, General. I'm being realistic. Jenna turned to face her. I saw a 50 caliber machine gun unload into that thing at Opal Creek. I saw the rounds hit, saw them tear through flesh that should have been destroyed. And I saw it keep coming. The wounds closed while I watched. The bullets fell out like splinters. Then what do you suggest? Fire. Jenna's voice was quiet, certain. Not to kill it. I don't think anything can kill it, but to drive it, to herd it toward the cage. And silver, not as ammunition, it doesn't work that way, but as a barrier. The thing doesn't like to touch silver. It won't cross a line of it if it can avoid it. So we build a funnel, fire behind it, silver in front, the cage at the end. And we pray. Jenna's smile was thin and humorless. Because at Opal Creek, we had all of that and more, and it still wasn't enough. The only reason I'm alive is because I ran. Because I left my team behind and I ran, and I didn't stop running until I hit the extraction point. Voss was silent for a moment, processing. You were the only survivor, she said finally. 7 others died. You think that was cowardice? I think it was survival. And I think that if you expect me to lead these soldiers into the same situation and come out with all of them alive, you're going to be disappointed. I'm not expecting miracles, Jenna. I'm expecting your best. My best got 2 of my fingers eaten. Jenna held up her left hand, the stumps visible in the harsh light of the equipment room. My best watched 7 people die in ways that I still see every time I close my eyes. My best is what you're getting, General, but don't pretend that it's going to be enough. They stood there for a moment, 2 women who'd seen too much, who'd sacrificed too much, who'd learned the hard way that the world contained horrors that didn't care about human courage or human ingenuity. Then Voss nodded once and turned toward the door. Briefing at 600, she said. I want you to meet with the team tonight, get to know them. They need to trust you if this is going to work. Trust isn't something I can manufacture, General. Then manufacture something that looks like it. Voss paused at the door, not turning around. And Jenna, don't tell them about the fingers. Let them figure that out for themselves. She left. Jenna stood alone in the equipment room, surrounded by machines that wouldn't be enough and silver that wouldn't be enough, and the memory of a sound that had haunted her for 5 years. The laughter. The high, thin, inhuman laughter that had accompanied the deaths of her team. She thought about Ruiz with his confidence and his scar, about Nguyen with his stillness and his knowing eyes, about Calloway with his books and his theories and his politician's smile. She thought about the cage and the fire and the plan that wouldn't work. And she thought about the thing waiting in the forest, hungry and patient and utterly inhuman. Manufacture trust, she whispered to the empty room. Right. She stayed there for another hour, memorizing the layout of the equipment, calculating distances and angles and the 1,000 variables that would determine whether any of them survived the next 48 hours. When she finally emerged, the base was quiet. The only sound the distant hum of generators and the whisper of wind through the trees that pressed too close against the fence. The team was waiting in the common area, a space that had been furnished with the same institutional furniture as every other room, gray couches, metal tables, a coffee machine that gurgled and spat like it was dying. Ruiz was cleaning his sidearm, field stripping it with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times in the dark. Nguyen sat in the corner, reading something on a tablet, his face illuminated by the blue glow. Calloway paced, his hands clasped behind his back, muttering to himself in what sounded like Dine Bizod. Evening, Jenna said. Ruiz looked up, his hands never stopping their work. Major, or should I say Jenna, the general said we're on a first-name basis now. Jenna is fine. Jenna then. He snapped the slide back into place, chambered around, and set the weapon on the table with a thud that seemed too loud. So, the Wendigo, real thing apparently, not just stories to scare kids into eating their vegetables. It's real. And you survived it. His eyes were fixed on hers, searching for something. How? I told you I ran. Bullshit, Ruiz smiled, but there was no humor in it. Nobody runs from something like that, not and lives to tell about it. There's something you're not telling us. Jenna met his gaze. There's a lot I'm not telling you, Sergeant. Things that won't make sense until you see them. Things that might not make sense even then. Try us. No, Jenna's voice was firm, the voice of command that she'd thought she'd left behind. You'll get your briefing tomorrow. Until then, I suggest you get some sleep. You're going to need it. She turned to leave, but Nguyen's voice stopped her. The dreams, he said quietly. You have them too. It wasn't a question. Jenna turned back to face him. What do you know about dreams, Korsman? Nguyen set down his tablet. I know that some things don't stay in the waking world. I know that Afghanistan wasn't just Taliban and IEDs. I know that there are places in the mountains where the wind sounds like voices and the voices sound hungry. He paused. And I know that you've seen something that changed you, something that took pieces of you and didn't give them back. Jenna's hand went to her missing fingers, the movement unconscious. Nguyen's eyes followed, and she saw understanding there, not pity but recognition. The look of someone who'd lost pieces of himself to the darkness and learned to function without them. Get some sleep, she said again, and this time her voice was softer. All of you, tomorrow we go hunting. She left them there, 3 soldiers preparing for a war they didn't understand, and walked to the small room that had been assigned to her. It was identical to every other room on the base. Narrow bed, metal locker, desk with a lamp that buzzed and flickered. She sat on the bed and stared at the wall, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of pine and wet stone and something else, something that reminded her of Opal Creek, of the moment before the attack when the world had gone still and the air had tasted like ozone. She lay back on the bed, fully clothed, her hand resting on her chest where she could feel her heart beating too fast. The phantom fingers itched, a sensation that had no physical cause but felt real nonetheless. Somewhere in the darkness, something laughed. Jenna closed her eyes and waited for dawn. The Black Hawk lifted off from Fort Brenner at 600, rising into a sky that was the wrong shade of blue. Jenna had seen that color before, at Opal Creek, in the hours before the attack, when the atmosphere had seemed to compress, and the light had taken on a quality that made everything look slightly unreal, like a photograph that had been overexposed. She sat in the jump seat across from Ruiz, her gear packed and checked, her mind running through the plan for the 100th time. The cage was in the cargo bay, secured with chains that seemed inadequate for its weight. The audio equipment was packed in shock-resistant cases, ready to be deployed. The silver, powdered and mixed with accelerant for the fire barriers, sat in drums that clanked against each other with every movement of the helicopter. Nguyen sat beside her, his medical kit clutched in his lap like a talisman. He hadn't spoken since they'd lifted off, his eyes fixed on some middle distance that only he could see. Calloway was in the seat behind them, going over notes on a waterproof tablet, his lips moving silently as he rehearsed whatever he'd prepared to say. Ruiz was the only one who seemed relaxed. He sat with his arms crossed, his eyes closed, apparently asleep despite the noise and vibration. Jenna knew the type, the kind of soldier who'd learned to rest whenever possible because you never knew when the next chance would come. The kind who'd seen enough combat to know that fear was a luxury you couldn't afford in the moment, so you packed it away and dealt with it later. If there was a later. How long? Calloway shouted over the engine noise. Jenna checked her watch, 20 minutes to the drop zone. And then we set up. The cage goes in the clearing, the same one where my team was attacked. It's the center of the thing's territory. It'll be drawn there by the audio, but it'll also be protective, aggressive. You make it sound like an animal. Animals follow rules. Jenna turned to look at him. This doesn't, but it does have patterns. Territory is one of them. It won't let us set up in that clearing without challenging us. Challenging us how? We'll find out. The lieutenant's face paled slightly, but he nodded and went back to his notes. Jenna turned back to the window, watching the landscape slide by beneath them. They were over the exclusion zone now. She could tell by the way the trees grew, twisted into spirals that defied natural growth patterns, their branches reaching toward the sky like supplicating hands. The forest here was older than it should be, older than the geological surveys suggested, filled with trees that had no business growing in Montana soil. Opal Creek, the pilot's voice came over the comms. 5 minutes to drop zone. Jenna felt her stomach clench. She'd promised herself she would never come back here. She'd promised the memory of her dead teammates, the ones whose faces she saw every night, the ones whose screams still echoed in her dreams. She'd promised them that she would honor their sacrifice by staying away, by letting the thing have its territory in exchange for peace everywhere else. But peace was gone now. The thing was hunting again, ranging farther than it ever had, killing soldiers who'd never heard of Opal Creek or the horror that lived there. And Jenna was the only one who knew enough to have any chance of stopping it. The Black Hawk descended, the rotor wash flattening the grass in the clearing below. Jenna could see the site now, the same clearing where she'd lost her fingers, where 7 people had died. The grass was taller here, somehow greener, fed by nutrients that didn't come from sunlight and soil. Touchdown in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. Ruiz's eyes snapped open. He was moving before the skids hit the ground, unstrapping and heading for the cargo bay with the efficiency of long practice. Nguyen followed, his medical kit still clutched in his hands. Calloway hesitated, then moved to join them. Jenna was the last to exit. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her hand on the frame, looking out at the clearing that had haunted her for 5 years. The air smelled the same, ozone and rotting meat and something else, something that had no name in any human language. The sky was still that wrong shade of blue, and the trees still grew in spirals, and the silence was still absolute. No birds, no insects, no sound but the wind and the dying whine of the helicopter's engines. Major Bowen, Calloway's voice cut through her reverie, we need you to confirm the placement. She jumped down, her boots hitting the ground with a solid thud that seemed to echo too loudly. The grass was wet with dew that shouldn't exist at this time of day, in this season. She walked to the center of the clearing, her hand unconsciously going to her sidearm, and looked around. The cage needed to go here, the audio equipment there where the trees would amplify the sound. The silver fire barriers in a funnel shape, leading the thing toward the trap. It was a good plan on paper. It had been a good plan 5 years ago, too. Here, she said, pointing to a spot where the grass was slightly flattened. The cage goes here. Ruiz was already directing the unloading, his voice sharp and authoritative. The cage came off the Black Hawk on a pallet, lowered by winch and guided by hand. It settled onto the grass with a sound like a bell being struck, the silver lining catching the light and throwing it back in fractured patterns. Beautiful, Ruiz said, running his hand along one of the bars. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. They built it to my specifications. Jenna walked around the cage, checking the silver lining, the electrical connections, the wheels that would allow them to move it once, if the thing was inside. But they didn't finish it. What do you mean? The silver. She pointed to a section where the lining was patchy, where the protective symbols were interrupted by the practical necessities of construction. It needs to be continuous. Any gap is a weakness. We can fix that. Ruiz pulled a roll of silver tape from his pack, military issue, designed for electrical work but pure enough for their purposes. Nguyen, give me a hand. The corpsman set down his medical kit and moved to help, the two of them working in silence as they reinforced the cage's lining. Calloway stood awkwardly to one side, clearly wanting to help but not knowing how. Lieutenant, Jenna said, set up the audio equipment. Speakers at the 4 cardinal points angled toward the center. The generator goes there by that tree. Yes, ma'am. He moved to obey, grateful for direction. Jenna walked the perimeter of the clearing, her eyes scanning the tree line. She was looking for signs, broken branches, disturbed soil, the subtle indicators that something large had passed through recently. She found them almost immediately. Claw marks 15 feet up the trunk of an ancient pine, the bark peeled back in spirals that matched the growth pattern of the trees themselves. It's been here, she said, loud enough for the others to hear. Recently, within the last day. How do you know? Calloway asked, pausing in his work. The marks, Jenna pointed to the tree. It does this when it's satisfied, when it's fed. It's territorial marking, like a predator declaring its hunting ground. So it's not hungry right now. Ruiz's voice was hopeful. It's always hungry. Jenna turned to face them. The marking just means it's confident. It knows this is its territory, and it's warning other predators away. Other predators? Calloway's voice cracked slightly. There are more of them. I don't know, I've only ever seen one, but the legends speak of wendigos as infectious, as something that spreads. Jenna shook her head. It doesn't matter, we deal with what's here now. They worked in silence after that, the only sounds the clank of metal and the hum of the generator as Calloway got it running. The audio equipment went up quickly, 4 speakers on tripods, positioned at the points of the compass, wired to a control unit that Ruiz set up near the cage. How does this work again? He asked, studying the interface. We play the recordings. The thing's own hunting cry, looped and amplified. It'll investigate, it can't help itself. The sound challenges its territory, its understanding of the area. It has to know what's making it. And while it's investigating, we spring the trap. The silver barriers go up behind it, cutting off retreat. The cage is the only way out that doesn't involve touching silver. It goes in, we electrify the floor, and we contain it. Simple, Ruiz's smile was thin. I like simple. Nothing about this is simple, Sergeant. Jenna checked her watch. It was nearly noon, the sun directly overhead, but the clearing remained in shadow, the trees blocking the light. We need to be done by dusk. It hunts at night. They worked faster after that, setting up the silver fire barriers, drums of accelerant mixed with silver powder, positioned to create a wall of flame that would drive the thing toward the cage. The placement was critical, too close, and the thing might decide to risk the fire rather than the silver. Too far, and it would have room to maneuver to escape. Jenna placed them herself, using her memory of the Opal Creek attack to guide her. The thing had come from the north that night, moving faster than anything had a right to move. She set the barriers to funnel it south, toward the cage, toward the only option that didn't involve burning or silver. Done, Ruiz announced, stepping back from the last drum. Silver lining complete, audio system online, fire barriers in place. What's next? We wait. Jenna walked to the center of the clearing, to the spot where the cage sat waiting. The Black Hawk will extract at 1800. Until then, we maintain position and stay alert. What about the recording? Calloway asked. When do we play it? Not yet. We wait until we have confirmation that it's in the area. Thermal imaging, movement sensors, something. If we play it too early, we might attract it before we're ready. And if we wait too long, then we spend the night in the forest with a wendigo. Jenna's voice was flat. Your choice, Lieutenant. Calloway paled but didn't argue. They settled into positions around the clearing, Ruiz by the audio controls, Nguyen by the medical supplies, Calloway pacing nervously near the cage. Jenna took the north position, closest to the marked tree, her eyes scanning the forest for movement. The afternoon passed slowly. The sun moved across the sky, but the clearing remained in shadow, the trees blocking the light. The air grew colder as the day progressed, a chill that had nothing to do with the season and everything to do with the thing that lived in these woods. At 1500, Ruiz broke the silence. "So, Major Bowen, tell us about the fingers." Jenna didn't turn around. "No. Come on, we're about to face this thing together. We deserve to know what we're getting into." "You know what you're getting into. You've read the files." "The files don't mention how you lost the fingers, just that you did." Ruiz's voice was curious, not malicious. "Was it during the attack, after?" "During." Jenna's hand went to her missing fingers, the movement automatic. "It took them one by one, while I watched." "Jesus," Calloway whispered. "It wasn't trying to kill me, not then. It was playing, testing my reactions, seeing how much I could take before I broke." Jenna turned to face them. "It likes fear. That's the thing you need to understand. It doesn't just feed on flesh, it feeds on terror. The more afraid you are, the more it wants you." "So we shouldn't be afraid." Ruiz's voice was skeptical. "You can't help being afraid, but you can control how you show it." Jenna looked at each of them in turn, Ruiz with his confidence, Nguyen with his stillness, Calloway with his fear barely hidden behind his training. "When it comes, don't scream. Don't run. Not immediately. Wait for the signal, then move to your positions. The trap only works if we're coordinated." "And if we're not coordinated?" Calloway asked. "Then you die. Like the 7 who came before you. Like the soldiers in those photographs. Like everyone who's ever faced this thing and didn't have a plan." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the whisper of wind through the trees. Then Nguyen spoke, his voice so quiet they had to strain to hear it. "It's here." Jenna spun, her hand going to her sidearm. "Where?" "North, moving through the trees." Nguyen pointed, his finger steady. "I can smell it." Jenna sniffed the air. There it was, the smell of ozone and rotting meat, stronger now, close enough to taste. "Positions," she ordered. "Ruiz, stand by on the audio. Nguyen, get to the medical station. Calloway, you're with me." They moved, the training taking over, the fear pushed down beneath the surface. Jenna walked to the center of the clearing, Calloway at her side, and faced the tree line where Nguyen had pointed. "When I give the signal," she said quietly, "you run. South toward the cage, don't look back." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." They waited. The smell grew stronger, the ozone stinging their nostrils, the rot making their eyes water. The temperature dropped, breath fogging in the air. The trees at the edge of the clearing began to move, not with the wind but against it, branches bending and swaying in patterns that suggested something large pushing through. "Steady," Jenna whispered. It emerged from the tree line at 1623, according to Jenna's watch. She would remember the time later, would write it in reports and tell it to debriefers and dream about it in the small hours of the morning. 1623. The moment when theory became reality, when the thing from her nightmares stepped into the daylight. It was taller than she remembered. 7 feet, maybe 8, its body stretched and twisted into proportions that violated human anatomy. The arms were too long, the joints bending backward, the fingers, if they could be called fingers, ending in claws that caught the light and threw it back in ways that hurt to look at. The head was wrong, too elongated, the mouth too wide, filled with teeth that looked like they'd been filed from bone. But the eyes were the worst. They weren't eyes at all, not really, just dark hollows that seemed to lead somewhere else, somewhere hungry and patient and utterly inhuman. "Oh God," Calloway whispered. "Don't," Jenna said, her voice steady despite the terror that was trying to claw its way out of her chest. "Don't pray, don't scream, don't do anything that shows fear." The thing stepped into the clearing, moving with a fluid grace that belied its size. It didn't walk so much as flow, the backward-bending joints propelling it forward in lurches that should have been awkward but were somehow terrifyingly elegant. It stopped 20 feet from Jenna and Calloway, its head tilting to one side in a gesture that was almost curious. "It remembers me," Jenna said quietly. She raised her left hand, showing the stumps. "See, it remembers." The thing's mouth opened, wider than it should have been able to open, and the sound that came out was laughter. High, thin, inhuman laughter that scraped against their eardrums like metal on metal. "Now," Jenna said, "Ruiz now." The audio system erupted, the speakers blasting a sound that was the thing's own hunting cry, amplified and distorted and played back at a frequency that made their teeth ache. The creature froze, its head snapping toward the speakers, the laughter cutting off mid-breath. "Move," Jenna shoved Calloway toward the cage, turning to follow him. But the thing was faster. It moved in a blur of motion, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat, one long arm reaching out to snag Calloway by the collar. The lieutenant screamed, the first mistake, the fatal mistake, and the thing's mouth opened wider, the laughter returning, louder now, triumphant. "No," Jenna drew her sidearm, firing into the creature's torso. The bullets hit, she saw them hit, but they might as well have been pebbles thrown against a wall. The thing didn't even flinch. "Silver," Ruiz was shouting. "Use the silver." Jenna reached for the silver powder at her belt, but the thing was moving again, dragging Calloway toward the tree line, the lieutenant's screams rising in pitch as he realized what was happening. She fired again, emptying her magazine, knowing it was useless but unable to stop herself. "Let him go," her voice was raw, desperate. She switched to Dine Bizod, the words coming from somewhere deep in her memory, the language lessons she'd taken in that basement at Langley. "You want me. I'm the one who got away." The thing paused. Its head turned, those hollow eyes fixing on Jenna with an intensity that made her want to scream. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed to consider. Then it dropped Calloway and moved toward her. "The cage," Jenna shouted, backing toward the trap. "Now, Ruiz, spring it now." But Ruiz was already moving, not toward the controls but toward Calloway, trying to drag the lieutenant to safety. Nguyen was running too, his medical kit abandoned, his face set in determination. "No," Jenna screamed. "The trap, spring the—" The thing was on her. She smelled the rot, felt the cold radiating from its body, saw the claws reaching for her face. She dove, rolling under its grasp, coming up on the other side with her knife in her hand. Useless. She knew it was useless, but she wasn't going to die without fighting. "Jenna," Ruiz's voice. "The cage, get it in the cage." She understood. The trap wasn't ready. The doors were open, the electrical system not yet activated. But it was the only chance. She turned and ran, not away from the thing but toward the cage, leading it, taunting it in Dine Bizod, words she didn't know she knew spilling from her lips in a torrent of sound and fury. The thing followed, faster than she was, closing the distance with every lurching step. She could feel its breath on her neck, could smell the hunger rolling off it in waves. 10 feet to the cage. 5, 3. She dove through the open door, rolling to the side, pressing herself against the silver-lined bars. The thing hesitated at the entrance, its hollow eyes scanning the interior, sensing the trap. "Close it," Jenna screamed. "Close the door." Ruiz was there, his hand on the lever, but the thing was moving, backing away, too smart to be caught so easily. It turned toward Ruiz, toward the threat, and Jenna saw her chance. She lunged, her good hand grabbing one of the thing's backward-bending arms, pulling with all her strength. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and turned on her, but she was already moving, dragging it backward into the cage, using its own momentum against it. "Now," she screamed, "close it now." The door slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot. Jenna rolled clear, hitting the electrified floor and convulsing as 50,000 volts coursed through her body. She screamed, the sound tearing from her throat, and then the current cut off and she lay there, smoking and twitching, as the thing raged inside the cage. It threw itself against the bars, the silver burning where it touched, leaving trails of black smoke and the smell of cooked meat. It screamed, that high thin sound that was laughter and pain and hunger all mixed together. It reached through the bars, the claws inches from Jenna's face, and she stared into those hollow eyes and saw something that might have been recognition. "Got you," she whispered. Then the world went black. Consciousness returned in fragments, like pieces of a broken mirror being reassembled one shard at a time. Jenna became aware of the smell first, antiseptic and blood, and the particular ozone scent that she now associated with the creature. Then the pain, radiating from every nerve ending, her muscles screaming in protest at the electrical trauma they'd endured. Then the sound, beeping machines, hushed voices, the distant thrum of helicopter blades. She opened her eyes to find herself in a medical bay, the walls white and featureless, the lights too bright. An IV dripped something into her arm, morphine, probably, given the floating sensation that accompanied the pain. She tried to move and found herself restrained, soft cuffs holding her wrists to the bed rails. "Easy," a voice said. Nguyen's face appeared above her, his expression unreadable. "Don't try to move, you've been through a lot." "The cage," Jenna croaked, her throat raw. "Did it work?" "It worked." Nguyen checked her vitals, his hands steady and professional. "The creature is contained. They're transporting it now." "Transporting it where?" "I don't know." Nguyen's eyes met hers and she saw something there, suspicion, maybe, or concern. Men in hazard suits arrived an hour ago. They took the cage, loaded it onto a truck. Black ops, not army. Jenna tried to sit up, the restraints preventing her. "I need to see." "You need to rest. You took 50,000 volts. You're lucky to be alive." "I need to see where they're taking it." Jenna's voice was stronger now, the urgency cutting through the morphine haze. "Nguyen, listen to me. That thing, it can't be moved. Not safely. The cage was designed for containment, not transport. If they jostle it, if the silver lining shifts..." "It's already gone." Nguyen's voice was quiet. "They left 10 minutes ago." Yana lay back, the energy draining from her. "Then it's over." "Is it?" Nguyen unfastened the restraints, his movements gentle. "You need to see something. Can you walk?" She could, barely. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, distant and unresponsive, but with Nguyen's help she managed to sit up, then stand, then shuffle toward the door of the medical bay. The base was quiet, the corridors empty, the sense of abandonment palpable. "Where is everyone?" she asked. The general called an assembly in the briefing room. Nguyen paused. "There's something you should know about Calloway." "Is he?" "Alive, barely." Nguyen's jaw tightened. "The thing, it didn't kill him, it just played with him like it did with you. He's missing 3 toes and most of his left ear, but he's alive." Jenna felt a surge of relief that surprised her. She hadn't expected to care about the lieutenant, had expected to feel only the grim satisfaction of survival. But the relief was there, real and sharp, along with something else, guilt. She'd led them into that clearing. She'd been responsible for their safety. "And Ruiz?" "Fine, shaken but fine. He dragged Calloway clear while you were," distracting the creature. Nguyen's voice held respect. "He's a good soldier." "They're all good soldiers." Jenna leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "That doesn't mean they're prepared for this." "No." Nguyen was silent for a moment. "Major Bowen, Jenna, can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "The things you said in Dine Bizod when you were taunting it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Those weren't just words, they were names, old names, names that shouldn't be spoken aloud." Jenna looked at him. "You understood them." "My grandmother was Navajo. She taught me things the military doesn't know." Nguyen's eyes were dark, depthless. "Those names, they're not just words. They're invitations, calls. You were inviting it to come to you." "I was distracting it." "You were offering yourself." Nguyen's voice was firm. I saw your face. You weren't planning to survive. You were planning to sacrifice yourself so the others could escape." Jenna didn't answer. She couldn't. "Why?" Nguyen asked. "Why would you do that for people you just met?" "Because I've seen what happens when you don't." Jenna pushed off from the wall, finding her balance. 7 people died at Opal Creek because I ran, because I saved myself and left them behind. I wasn't going to do that again. You didn't leave them behind. You survived. There's a difference. Not to me. Jenna started walking, her steps unsteady but determined. "Now take me to the briefing room. I need to see what's happening." They found the team assembled in the same room where they'd first met, though the atmosphere had changed completely. Ruiz sat in the corner, his usual confidence replaced by a hollow-eyed stare that suggested he was seeing something that wasn't there. Calloway was in a wheelchair, his foot wrapped in bandages, his left ear covered by a dressing that was already staining red. He looked younger than he had before, the politician's polish stripped away to reveal the scared boy underneath. General Voss stood at the front of the room, her posture unchanged, her expression carefully neutral. But Jenna could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand hovered near her sidearm. Something was wrong. "Major Baldwin," Voss said as Jenna entered. "Good to see you on your feet." "What's happening, General?" "The operation was successful. The target has been contained and is being transported to a secure facility for study." Voss's voice was official, the voice of someone reading from a prepared statement. "Your team performed admirably under extreme circumstances. Commendations will be forthcoming." "Study?" Jenna's voice was flat. "You're going to study it." "The scientific value of—" "There is no scientific value." Jenna stepped forward, her anger giving her strength. "That thing isn't a specimen. It's not a biological anomaly that can be dissected and understood. It's a predator, General, a hunter. And now you've put it in a truck and sent it off to God knows where, with a silver lining that probably shifted during transport, in a cage that was designed for containment, not travel. The transport was handled by specialists." "Black Ops specialists," Jenna cut her off. "Men in hazard suits who don't answer to you, who don't answer to anyone." The room went silent. Ruiz looked up from his corner, his eyes focusing for the first time since Jenna had entered. Calloway's hand went to his bandaged ear, his face pale. Nguyen stood quietly by the door, watching. "You knew," Jenna said. "You knew this was never about containment. You knew someone wanted it alive." Voss was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat and produced a pack of cigarettes, civilian, unfiltered, the kind that had been banned from military facilities decades ago. She lit one with a Zippo that clicked open with a sound like a gun being cocked. "You knew," Jenna repeated. "I suspected." Voss exhaled, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. "The funding for this operation, it came from somewhere above my pay grade, way above, someone with an interest in biological research. Biological weapons. I don't know what they want it for." Voss's voice was tired, the first crack in her armor that Jenna had ever seen. "I just know that when I asked for resources to hunt this thing, the answer came back within hours. Full funding, personnel, equipment, everything I asked for and more. Because they wanted the creature, not dead, alive." "Yes." Voss looked at her cigarette, not at Jenna. "Containment was never the goal, capture was. And you went along with it." "I did what I had to do." Voss finally met her eyes. "People were dying, Jenna, soldiers, good men and women who signed up to serve their country and ended up as food for something that shouldn't exist. If capturing it meant saving lives, then yes, I went along with it. And if capturing it means giving it to people who want to use it, who want to turn it into a weapon, then that's a problem for another day." Voss stubbed out her cigarette. "Today we survived. Today the thing is contained. Today no one else dies." Jenna laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. "You think containment is possible. You think a cage and some silver can hold something like that forever." I think it's the best chance we have. It's not a chance, it's a delay. Jenna turned to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. That thing, it's old, General, older than human civilization, older than the concepts of good and evil that we use to understand the world. It doesn't think like we do. It doesn't want what we want, it just hungers. Then we'll keep it fed. Jenna spun back around. What? The transport team, they have protocols, livestock, animals, whatever it takes to keep it satisfied. Voss's voice was steady, but Jenna could hear the doubt underneath. It's not ideal, but it's manageable. Nothing about this is manageable. Jenna's voice rose, her control slipping. You don't negotiate with a force of nature. You don't domesticate a hurricane. That thing, it will escape. It will kill everyone in that facility, and then it will come looking for the people who put it in a cage. Then we'll be ready. Will we? Jenna looked at Ruiz, at his hollow eyes, at Calloway, at his missing toes and his bandaged ear, at Nguyen, at his knowing, haunted expression. Will any of us ever be ready for something like that? No one answered. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of what they'd seen, what they'd done, what they knew was coming. The convoy left an hour ago, Voss said finally. They're taking it to a facility in Nevada. Black site, off the books. Even I don't know the exact location. Then how do we know they made it? We don't, Voss met her eyes. We don't know anything, we just wait and hope. Jenna turned back to the window. Outside, the Montana night was absolute, the stars hidden by clouds that had rolled in from the west. She thought about the thing in the truck, bouncing along highways and back roads, contained by silver that might have shifted, powered by electricity that might fail. She thought about the men in hazard suits, faceless and nameless, delivering their cargo to a facility that didn't exist. She thought about the hunger, the endless, patient hunger. I want to go home, Calloway said quietly. I want to see my family. You'll be debriefed first, Voss said. Standard procedure, then you can go home. And tell them what? The lieutenant's voice cracked. Tell them I lost 3 toes to a training accident. Tell them I saw something that shouldn't exist. Tell them that there are things in the dark that eat people and laugh while they do it. Tell them whatever you want. Voss's voice was gentle, the first time Jenna had heard that tone from her. Just, don't tell them the truth. They wouldn't believe you anyway. I wouldn't believe me either. Calloway laughed, a broken sound. I was there and I don't believe it. You should rest, Nguyen said, moving to the lieutenant's side. Your injuries. My injuries don't matter. Calloway grabbed Nguyen's arm, his eyes wide and desperate. What matters is that it's still out there. In a truck, in a cage, whatever, it's still out there. And it knows us now. It knows our faces. It knows our names. It doesn't know names, Jenna said quietly. It knows fear. It knows the smell of terror. That's what it remembers. Then it remembers me. Calloway released Nguyen, his hand falling to his lap. God help me, it remembers me. The room fell silent again. Ruiz stood, his movements stiff, and walked to the window where Jenna stood. He didn't speak for a long moment, just stared out at the darkness. You were right, he said finally. About the trap, about the plan, about everything. I was lucky. No, Ruiz turned to face her. You knew what you were doing. You knew what it wanted, how it thought. You let it into that cage like you were leading a dance. I was improvising. You were surviving. Ruiz's voice was firm. There's a difference. The same words Nguyen had used. Jenna almost smiled. Maybe. I want to learn. Ruiz's eyes were serious, the hollow look replaced by something else, determination, maybe, or obsession. Whatever you know, whatever you learned from Opal Creek, I want to learn it too. Why? Because it's not over. Ruiz glanced at Voss, then back to Jenna. You know it's not over. That thing, it will escape, or someone will let it out, or there will be another one somewhere else. And when that happens, I want to be ready. You can't be ready for this. No one can. Then I'll be as ready as possible. Ruiz held out his hand, his left hand whole and unblemished. "Teach me." Jenna looked at his hand, then at her own. The stumps where her fingers had been, the scars that would never fade. "I don't know if I can," she said. "Try." She took his hand. It was warm, alive, human. The touch grounded her, reminded her that she was still here, still breathing, still capable of connection. "All right," she said, "I'll try." Voss cleared her throat. "If you're done with the moment, we have paperwork to complete. Debriefings, reports, the usual bureaucracy. Then you can all go home." "Home," Jenna repeated. The word felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten. "I don't have a home, General. I haven't had one since Opal Creek." "Then find one." Voss gathered her papers, her movements brisk and efficient. "You've earned it, all of you." She left, the door closing behind her with a sound of finality. The team stood in silence, 4 survivors of something that shouldn't exist, bound together by trauma and terror, and the knowledge that the world was darker than they'd been taught. "I need a drink," Ruiz said. "I need a priest," Calloway added. "I need sleep," Nguyen said quietly. Jenna said nothing. She was staring at her left hand, at the stumps that had been fingers, at the scars that marked her as someone who had faced the darkness and lived. And as she watched, she felt it. A sensation that had nothing to do with memory or phantom pain. A tingling, starting deep in the healed flesh, spreading outward like electricity. Her missing fingers were itching. She stared at her hand, her heart hammering in her chest. The itching grew stronger, more insistent, as if the fingers were still there, still attached, still feeling. "Jenna," Ruiz's voice distant, "you okay?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. She was remembering the thing's hollow eyes, the way it had looked at her in the cage, the recognition she'd seen there. "It remembers me." The itching intensified, becoming pain, becoming something that felt like pulling, like being drawn toward something distant and hungry. "Jenna." She looked up, her eyes wide, her breath coming in gasps. "It's not over," she whispered. "What?" "It's not over." She held up her hand, showing them the stumps, the impossible itching. "It knows me, it's calling me." The room went silent. Calloway's face went pale. Nguyen stepped forward, his medical training taking over, but Jenna waved him off. "Not physical," she said. "Something else, something older." "The Wendigo," Ruiz's voice was barely audible. "It's reaching out to you." "I don't know." Jenna lowered her hand, but the sensation remained, the itching, the pulling, the sense of being connected to something that shouldn't exist. "But I think we need to find out where they took it, before it finds us." "How?" Calloway asked. "The General said even she doesn't know." "Someone knows." Jenna's voice was firm, the voice of command returning. "Someone always knows, we just have to find them." She walked to the door, her hand still itching, her mind racing. Behind her, she heard the others moving, following, drawn by the same force that had brought them together in the first place. The hunt wasn't over, it was just beginning. Outside, the Montana night was cold and clear, the stars hidden behind clouds that seemed to pulse with their own dark energy. Somewhere in the darkness, a truck was carrying a cage toward a facility that didn't exist, carrying a hunger that couldn't be contained. And somewhere in the space between worlds, something was laughing. Jenna Bowen stood in the darkness, her missing fingers itching with a sensation that had no name, and knew that she would never be free. "The devil you know," she thought, "the devil you know." But the devil was learning her name too. And it was hungry. The Hollow Mine. A Skinwalker horror story. The note arrived on the 3rd night of Alex Mercer's stay at the Pine Ridge Motel, slipped under the door sometime between the 2:00 a.m. check of the parking lot, empty, as always, and the 6:00 a.m. awakening that came with the neon sign outside buzzing to life with a sound like angry hornets. Alex found it while searching for the complimentary coffee packets that were supposed to be in the drawer beside the Bible. The Bible was there, its pages gilded and unreadable in the dim light filtering through curtains that hadn't been washed since the Clinton administration. The coffee packets were not, but the note was. Handwritten. That was the first thing Alex noticed. Not printed, not typed, but written in ink that looked black in the gray morning light but might have been dark brown, the color of dried blood. The paper was thick, textured, expensive, the kind of stationery that people used for wedding invitations or death announcements, the kind that cost more per sheet than the motel charged per night. The message was simple. The old Silverpine Trail knows what you're running from. It'll keep your secrets. No signature, no return address, no indication of who had written it or how they knew Alex's name, though the envelope, also handwritten, also expensive, was addressed with perfect accuracy to the room number, the name, even the dates of stay that Alex had provided at check-in. Alex sat on the edge of the bed, the note held between two fingers, and felt the familiar cold settling into their chest. The cold that had been there for 6 months now, since the night in the parking garage, since the thing that had happened that Alex couldn't think about without wanting to scream. The thing they were running from. The note was right about that at least. Alex was running. Had been running for 6 months, through 3 states and 24 motels just like this one, threadbare carpets, stained mattresses, the smell of industrial cleaner masking older, darker odors. Running from the memory of blood on concrete, of eyes that had met Alex's in the moment before the end, of the sound that had followed. The sound that still echoed in dreams. Alex had come to Silverpine because it was far from everything, far from the city where the thing had happened, far from the people who knew Alex's face, Alex's name, Alex's shame. The guidebooks had called it pristine wilderness and untouched natural beauty, which was code for no cell service and nearest hospital 50 miles away. It was perfect, or it had been until the note arrived. Alex read it again, studying the handwriting. It was elegant, old-fashioned, the kind of script that people didn't learn anymore. The letters looped and swirled in ways that seemed almost deliberate, as if the writer had taken care to make each word beautiful. The old Silverpine Trail knows what you're running from. It'll keep your secrets. A threat, an invitation, a joke. Alex couldn't tell, but something about the note resonated, struck a chord that had been vibrating since the parking garage, since the moment when the world had revealed itself to be darker and hungrier than Alex had ever imagined. They stood, moving to the window, pulling back the curtain to look out at the parking lot. Empty, as it had been at 2:00 a.m. The motel clerk's car was gone from its spot by the office, which meant the clerk, a heavy-set man with a walrus mustache and eyes that never quite met Alex's, had gone home for the day. The only other vehicle was Alex's own, a rusted Subaru with 200,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on since Nebraska. No one had followed. Alex had been careful, paid in cash, used a fake name, kept to back roads and small towns. No one should have known where they were. No one should have known to leave a note. But someone did. Alex looked at the note again, then at the backpack in the corner, packed and ready, as it always was. The hiking boots by the door, broken in and reliable. The water bottles, the energy bars, the map of Silverpine National Park that the ranger station had provided yesterday. The Silverpine Trail. Alex had looked at it on the map, traced its path through the wilderness with a finger. It was old, marked as unmaintained and hazardous, a remnant of the logging days when men had come to these mountains to take what they wanted and leave the rest to rot. The main trails were well marked, well traveled, safe enough for families with children and retirees with cameras. The Silverpine Trail was different. It led deep into the forest, into places where the trees grew older and the shadows grew deeper, where the guidebooks warned against going alone. Alex had planned to avoid it, had planned to stick to the safe paths, the pretty waterfalls, the scenic overlooks, to take photographs that would prove they were fine, that the running was just a vacation, that the darkness hadn't followed them from the city. But the note changed things. "It'll keep your secrets." Alex thought about the secret, the thing that woke them up at 3:00 a.m. with their heart hammering and their sheets soaked with sweat. The thing that made them flinch at sudden movements and avoid eye contact with strangers. The thing that had sent them running across 3 states with no destination in mind, just the need to be somewhere else, anywhere else. The parking garage, the blood, the eyes. The sound. Alex folded the note carefully, sliding it into the pocket of their jacket. They would go to the trail, not because they wanted to, but because the alternative, staying in this motel, waiting for whoever had left the note to return, wondering what else they knew, was worse. At least on the trail, Alex would be moving, and movement was safety. Movement was survival. They dressed quickly, hiking pants, moisture-wicking shirt, the jacket with the note in its pocket. They filled their water bottles and packed their energy bars and checked their boots one last time. They shouldered the backpack and took one last look at the room, the stained bedspread, the buzzing neon, the Bible in the drawer that no one ever read. Then they walked out, closing the door behind them with a sound that felt like finality. The morning was cold, the Montana air sharp enough to cut. Alex's breath fogged as they walked to the Subaru, as they started the engine and listened to it complain before settling into its usual rough idle. The check engine light glared accusingly from the dashboard, but the car moved when Alex put it in drive, and that was all that mattered. Silver Pine National Park was 20 miles from the motel, the road winding through hills covered in pine and shadow. Alex drove slowly, partly because the Subaru didn't handle curves well and partly because they were in no hurry to reach their destination. The note sat heavy in their pocket, a physical weight that seemed to pull the car forward. "It knows what you're running from." How could anyone know? Alex had told no one, had shown no one, had buried the memory so deep that sometimes in the daylight hours they could almost convince themselves it hadn't happened, that the parking garage had been a dream, a hallucination, a stress-induced episode. But the nights told the truth. The nights were when the memory surfaced, when the blood became real again, when the eyes, those terrible, knowing eyes, met Alex's across the distance of 6 months and 3 states and found them anyway. The ranger station appeared around a curve, a small building that looked like it had been assembled from prefabricated parts and good intentions. Alex parked and went inside, the bell above the door announcing their arrival with a sound like breaking glass. The ranger behind the desk was young, maybe 25, with the kind of earnest expression that suggested she still believed in the mission of the National Park Service. Her name tag read Martinez, and her smile was genuine when she looked up from her computer. "Morning, welcome to Silver Pine. How can I help you today?" "I was wondering about the trails." Alex kept their voice neutral, casual. "The Silver Pine Trail specifically." The smile faltered, just for a moment, but Alex saw it, the shadow that crossed Martinez's face before she could hide it. "The Silver Pine Trail, that's not really maintained anymore. Hasn't been for years." "I saw it on the map." "Yeah, it's still on the maps. We keep meaning to update them, but—" Martinez shrugged, a gesture that tried for casual and missed. "Budget cuts, you know how it is. The thing is, nobody really goes up there anymore. The main trail washed out years ago and the Forest Service never fixed it. Too remote, too expensive. But it's still accessible." "Technically," Martinez leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Look, I'm not supposed to discourage visitors, but the Silver Pine Trail isn't safe. There are drop-offs, unstable ground, wildlife, and there's no cell service once you get past the first mile. If something happens, you're on your own." "I understand." "Do you?" Martinez's eyes searched Alex's face, looking for something. Most people who ask about that trail, they're looking for something, running from something. Is that you? Alex felt the cold in their chest intensify. I'm just hiking. Sure. Martinez didn't sound convinced. She reached under the desk and produced a map, different from the one Alex had received yesterday, older, more detailed, marked with symbols that Alex didn't recognize. If you're going anyway, take this. It shows the old trail markers, the ones they used before the trail was abandoned. And she hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a pendant on a leather cord, made of silver or something that looked like silver. Take this too. What is it? Protection. Martinez's voice was barely audible. My grandmother gave it to me. She was Navajo, she said. She said there are things in these mountains that aren't just animals, things that wear skins, things that want what we have. Alex stared at the pendant. It was beautiful, intricate, worked with patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. I can't take this. You can. Martinez pressed it into Alex's hand, her fingers warm and human and alive. I don't go up there, I don't need it, but you're going where the shadows are deep. Take it, please. Alex closed their hand around the pendant, feeling its weight, its warmth. Thank you. Don't thank me, just be careful. And if you see something that doesn't make sense, something that moves wrong or smells wrong or looks at you in a way that isn't right, don't question it. Don't try to understand it, just run. Alex nodded, slipping the pendant over their head, tucking it under their shirt. The metal was cool against their skin, a point of contact that seemed to anchor them in their body in the moment. The trailhead, Alex said. Where is it? Martinez pointed to a spot on the map, her finger trembling slightly. Here, but the road's not marked. You'll have to look for the old logging sign. It's faded, but it's still there. Silver Pine Logging Company, established 1887. 1887. Yeah, Martinez's voice was distant. They logged these mountains for 40 years, took everything they could and left the rest to rot. Then they just left, closed up overnight, abandoned the equipment, walked away. No one knows why. What do you think happened? Martinez met Alex's eyes. I think they found something in the trees, something that didn't want to be found. And I think they ran, just like you're running, just like everyone who goes up that trail is running from something. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that Alex didn't want to understand. They folded the map and slipped it into their pocket beside the note. Thank you, they said again. Don't, Martinez repeated. Just come back, that's all I ask, come back. Alex left the ranger station, the bell announcing their departure with the same sound of breaking glass. The Subaru was waiting, patient and unreliable. The trail was waiting too, somewhere in the mountains, somewhere in the shadows. They drove. The turnoff was where Martinez had said it would be, marked by a sign so faded that Alex almost missed it. Silverpine Logging Company, the letters barely visible against weathered wood. The road beyond was dirt, rutted, barely wide enough for the Subaru. Alex drove slowly, the car complaining with every bump and dip, the check engine light flashing in protest. The forest closed in around them, the trees growing older and larger with every mile. These weren't the managed forests of the lower elevations, the carefully cultivated pines that grew in orderly rows. These were ancient trees, their trunks wider than cars, their branches reaching across the road to form a canopy that blocked the sun. The temperature dropped. Alex turned on the heat, watching their breath fog the windows even with the vents blowing. The road climbed, winding through hills that became steeper with every turn, the Subaru struggling against the grade. Then the road ended. Not gradually, not with a sign or a barrier, but suddenly. The dirt simply stopping, giving way to forest floor covered in pine needles and shadow. Alex stopped the car, the engine ticking as it cooled, and looked at what lay ahead. The trailhead. It was marked by a post that had once held a sign, now rotted away to splinters. Beyond it, a path was visible, barely, a narrow track through the undergrowth that led upward into the trees. Alex turned off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the whisper of wind through branches that moved in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. They sat for a moment, their hand on the door handle, the note and the map and the pendant all pressing against their body with physical weight. They thought about turning back, about driving down the mountain, about finding another motel in another town and continuing to run. But the note had found them. Whoever had written it knew where they were, knew what they were running from. Running wouldn't help. Running had never helped. Alex opened the door and stepped out. The air was cold and sharp, filled with the smell of pine and something else, something metallic and ancient, like the smell of old pennies or dried blood. Alex shouldered their pack and walked to the trailhead, their boots crunching on pine needles that sounded too loud in the silence. The trail was overgrown, choked with vines that seemed to twitch when touched. Alex noticed it immediately. The way the vegetation moved, not with the wind but against it, reaching toward their hands with tendrils that seemed almost curious. They pulled back, heart hammering, and the vines settled, becoming just vines again. Just plants, just the forest being the forest. "Get a grip," Alex whispered to themselves. "It's just a hike, just a trail, just trees." They started walking. The trail climbed steadily, winding through forests that grew older and darker with every step. The trees here were massive, their trunks covered in moss that glowed faintly in the dim light, their branches reaching across the path to form a tunnel of shadow. Alex walked for an hour, then two, the silence broken only by their own footsteps and the occasional rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. They should have felt peaceful. This was what they had come for, the solitude, the wilderness, the chance to leave the city and its darkness behind. But peace wouldn't come. Instead, there was a growing sense of wrongness, of being watched, of moving through a landscape that was aware of their presence and wasn't entirely pleased about it. The vines were the first sign. They appeared around the third hour, thick ropes of vegetation that crossed the trail at waist height, their leaves dark and waxy, their stems pulsing with a rhythm that might have been sap flow or might have been something else. Alex stopped studying them. They hadn't been here on the way up, they were sure of it, they would have noticed. The trail had been clear. But now it wasn't. They reached out to push the vines aside and felt the twitch again, a movement that started at their touch and traveled along the length of the vine like a shiver. They pulled back, heart racing, and the vines settled. "Just the wind," Alex whispered, just the wind." But there was no wind. The air was still, heavy, charged with an electricity that made Alex's hair stand on end. They pushed through, the vines parting with a sound like whispering, and continued up the trail. The waterfall appeared around the next bend, cascading down rocks that gleamed with moisture, pooling in a basin so clear that it reflected the sky like a second world below. It was beautiful, idyllic, the kind of scene that belonged on postcards and calendar pages. Alex approached it cautiously, their senses alert for wrongness. The water was clear, yes, but the reflections were wrong. Their shadows stretched the opposite way, reaching toward the falls instead of away from them. And the sky in the reflection was different, darker, filled with clouds that didn't exist in the world above. They looked up. The real sky was blue, cloudless, the sun directly overhead. They looked down. The reflected sky was storm-dark, angry, the clouds moving in patterns that suggested something watching from above. Alex backed away, their heart hammering, and the reflection shattered, becoming just water again, just a pool, just a pretty scene in a pretty forest. "You're imagining things," they told themselves. "Stress, fatigue, you're seeing things that aren't there." But they didn't believe it. They had seen the wrongness in the reflection, had felt the weight of eyes that weren't there. Something was watching, something was waiting. They moved on, faster now, their earlier peace replaced by urgency. They needed to find a place to camp, to rest, to gather themselves before the darkness came. The map showed a clearing ahead, a flat spot where the old loggers had built a cabin. They would camp there, they would sleep, and in the morning they would turn back. The clearing appeared as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the light filtering through the trees in beams that seemed solid enough to touch. The cabin was there, or what remained of it, logs rotted to the consistency of sponge, a roof that had collapsed years ago, a stone fireplace that still stood like a monument to human ambition. Alex set up their tent in the center of the clearing, as far from the tree line as possible. They gathered firewood from the cabin's remains, careful to avoid anything that looked too old, too touched by time and weather. They built a small fire in a circle of stones that had been placed by hands long dead, and sat beside it as the darkness gathered. The night was cold. Alex huddled in their jacket, the pendant warm against their chest, and watched the fire dance. They thought about the note, about the ranger's warning, about the vines that twitched and the reflections that lied. They thought about the parking garage, about the blood, about the eyes. They thought about running, and how it never seemed to help. The fire burned low, embers glowing like eyes in the dark. Alex fed it another log, watching the sparks rise toward the stars that were appearing overhead, bright and cold and utterly indifferent. They would sleep soon. They had to. The trail would still be there in the morning, and the morning would bring light, and light would bring safety. Or so they hoped. Alex crawled into their tent, into their sleeping bag, into the darkness that smelled of nylon and sweat and fear. They closed their eyes and listened to the night. The wind in the trees, the crackle of dying embers, the distant sound of something moving through the forest that might have been an animal or might have been something else. They slept. And in their dreams the parking garage waited, the blood gleamed, and the eyes, those terrible knowing eyes, opened wide and found them in the darkness. Alex woke to the sound of whispers. Not words exactly, but something close. The babble of the creek that ran through the clearing, transformed by half-sleep into something that almost made sense. They lay in their sleeping bag, eyes closed, listening to the water speak in a language that had no translation, that existed in the space between meaning and sound. "Come." The word was clear, distinct, rising above the babble like a stone breaking the surface of a pool. Alex's eyes snapped open, their heart hammering, their breath coming in short gasps. The tent was dark, not just night dark but absolute dark, the darkness of a place where light had never existed. Alex fumbled for their flashlight, found it, clicked it on. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing nylon walls and sleeping bag and backpack, all reassuringly normal. The whispering continued, but now it was just water again, just a creek running over stones, just the sound of the forest being the forest. Alex checked their watch. 4:47 a.m. Still hours until dawn. They considered getting up, building up the fire, waiting for the sun. But the cold was intense, the kind of cold that made movement painful, and their sleeping bag was warm, and the darkness outside the tent was absolute. They turned off the flashlight and closed their eyes. Sleep didn't come. Instead, there was a waiting, a listening, a sense of being observed by something that existed in the space between waking and dreaming. Alex lay still, their breathing shallow, their ears straining for any sound that didn't belong. The whispering returned, but softer now, almost gentle. "Sleep, rest, we will keep your secrets." Alex's eyes snapped open again. This time they didn't reach for the flashlight. They lay still, listening, trying to locate the source of the sound. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the creek and the trees and the air itself. "Who's there?" Their voice was loud, too loud, cracking on the last word. Silence, absolute silence. Even the creek seemed to pause, holding its breath, waiting. Then from outside the tent a sound. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving in a circle around the clearing. Not human footsteps, too heavy, too irregular, accompanied by a clicking sound like claws on stone. Alex reached for their knife, the blade they'd packed for protection against bears and mountain lions. It felt inadequate in their hand, a toy against whatever was moving outside. The footsteps stopped, directly outside the tent, so close that Alex could hear breathing, not human breathing, but something deeper, slower, filled with a hunger that had no name. They held their breath. The thing outside held its too. For a moment, just a moment, there was a perfect silence, two predators waiting to see who would move first. Then the footsteps resumed, moving away, circling the clearing and disappearing into the trees. The sound of breaking branches followed, then silence. Alex waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. When nothing returned, they finally allowed themselves to breathe, to move, to think. It was gone. Whatever it was gone. They unzipped the tent flap with trembling hands, the knife held ready, and peered out into the darkness. The fire had died to embers, glowing faintly in the center of the stone circle. The clearing was empty, the trees dark shapes against a sky that was beginning to lighten with the approach of dawn. But something was wrong. Alex crawled out, their boots crunching on frost-covered grass, and looked around. The clearing was the same, the ruined cabin, the stone fireplace, the circle of stones around the fire pit. But there was something new, something that hadn't been there when they'd gone to sleep. On their backpack, which they'd left by the fire, there was a gift. A rabbit, gutted, cleaned, arranged with care on a bed of pine needles. It was still warm. Alex could feel the heat radiating from it when they approached, the body fresh, the blood still wet. And around it, a circle of blackened stones. Alex didn't remember placing those stones. They were certain they hadn't. They would have remembered, would have noticed. The stones were arranged in a perfect circle, each one touching the next, forming a ring around the rabbit that looked almost ritualistic. They backed away, their knife forgotten in their hand. The rabbit was an offering, they understood that now. A gift from whatever had walked outside their tent in the night. A gesture that might have been friendly or might have been something else entirely. "Thank you," Alex whispered, not knowing what else to say. "But I can't. I don't." They didn't finish. The words felt wrong, the gratitude misplaced. This wasn't a gift from a friend. This was a message from something that didn't think like humans, that didn't understand human concepts of kindness or generosity. This was a claiming, a marking, a way of saying, "You are in my territory and I am aware of you." Alex packed quickly, not bothering to eat, not bothering to build up the fire. They shoved their sleeping bag into its stuffed sack, collapsed the tent with shaking hands, shouldered their pack and started walking. They would go back, down the trail, to the car, to the road, to anywhere but here. The note had been a trap, they saw that now. The trail didn't keep secrets, it consumed them. But the trail had changed. Alex noticed it immediately. The path that had been clear yesterday was overgrown today, choked with vines that hadn't been there before. The trees had shifted, their branches reaching lower, their trunks seeming to lean inward, creating a tunnel that hadn't existed in the daylight. They walked anyway, pushing through vegetation that seemed to resist, that caught at their clothes and their pack with tendrils that felt almost intentional. The going was slow, the trail winding in directions that didn't match the map, leading them deeper into forest that grew older and darker with every step. The sun rose, but its light didn't penetrate the canopy. The forest remained in twilight, the shadows deep and hungry. Alex walked for hours, or what felt like hours. Their watch had stopped at 5:17, the hands frozen, the digital display blank. They walked until their legs ached and their lungs burned, and their mind began to play tricks, showing them shapes in the shadows that might have been animals or might have been something else. They walked until they couldn't walk anymore, and then they stopped, leaning against a tree that was wider than their car, gasping for breath. That was when they saw the marks. They were on the tree beside them, 15 feet up the trunk, claw marks, deep gouges in the bark that had peeled away in spirals. The pattern was deliberate, artistic almost, the work of something that had taken its time, that had wanted to leave a message. Alex looked up, following the marks, and felt the temperature drop. The air grew cold, their breath fogging, their skin prickling with gooseflesh. The forest went silent. No birds, no insects, no sound but the whisper of wind through branches that moved in patterns that suggested something watching from above. They pulled out their compass, needing to know which direction was which, needing some anchor in a world that had lost its bearings. The needle spun, slowly at first, then faster, whirling in a circle that had no north, no south, no direction at all. "No," Alex whispered. "No, no, no." They shook the compass, tapped it, held it level and still. The needle continued to spin, faster now, a blur of motion that suggested forces at work that had nothing to do with magnetism. A sound echoed from the ridge above, like cracking bone, like breaking wood, like something large moving through the forest with purpose. Alex looked up, their heart hammering, and saw movement in the trees, something tall, something wrong, something that moved with a gait that no human could replicate. They ran. Not down the trail. There was no trail anymore, just forest, but through the trees, branches whipping their face, roots catching their feet, the undergrowth reaching up to trip them with every step. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs shook, and their minds screamed for them to stop, to rest, to think. But they couldn't stop. The thing behind them wasn't stopping. They could hear it moving through the trees, not running but flowing, covering ground with a speed that shouldn't have been possible. The cracking sound continued, rhythmic now, like footsteps or like joints popping or like something else entirely. They burst into a clearing and stopped, their breath coming in ragged gasps, their hands on their knees. The clearing was different from the one where they'd camped, larger, more open, filled with the rusted remains of human activity. Pickaxes, shovels, wheelbarrows turned to iron oxide, and in the center a hole in the ground that breathed. The mine. Alex approached it cautiously, their fear of the thing behind them overridden by their fear of what lay ahead. The mine shaft was dark, a vertical drop into darkness that seemed to have no bottom, but it was exhaling, sending up drafts of air that smelled of damp and metal and something else, something ancient and hungry. They looked up toward the ridge where the sound had come from. The trees were still, the movement gone, the cracking sound faded to silence. But they could feel it still, the presence, the attention, the hunger that had no name. They were being herded. They understood that now. The trail hadn't led them astray, it had led them here, to this place, to this mine. Whatever was hunting them wanted them here, in this clearing, at this entrance. But why? Alex approached the mine shaft, their flashlight in hand, and shone the beam into the darkness. The light didn't penetrate far. The darkness was too thick, too absolute, but it revealed enough. Wooden supports, rotted and sagging, a ladder descending into the dark, and something else. Something perched on the edge of the shaft, just beyond the reach of the light. It was tall. That was all Alex could tell, tall and thin and wrong, the limbs bent at angles that shouldn't have been possible. It was watching them, they could feel it, those hollow spaces where eyes should have been fixed on Alex with an intensity that made their skin crawl. They blinked. It was gone. Alex stared at the empty space where it had been, their heart hammering, their breath coming in short gasps. Had they imagined it? Had the stress and fear and exhaustion finally broken something in their mind? They looked around the clearing. The rusted tools, the breathing mine, the trees that leaned inward like spectators at an execution. Everything was real, solid, undeniable. But the thing, the watcher, was gone. They backed away from the mine shaft, their flashlight beams sweeping the clearing, searching for any sign of movement. There was nothing. Just the wind, just the trees, just the silence that was somehow worse than the sounds had been. They needed to rest. They needed to think. They needed to figure out how to get out of this forest before night came again. They found a spot by the tree line, far from the mine but not too far, close enough to run if they needed to but hidden enough to feel safe. They sat with their back to a trunk, their knife in their hand, their eyes scanning the clearing for movement. The sun was higher now, the light filtering through the canopy in beams that seemed solid enough to touch. The forest was coming alive around them, birds calling, insects buzzing, the sounds of a normal day in a normal forest. But Alex didn't believe it. They had seen the marks on the trees, had felt the temperature drop, had watched their compass spin. This forest wasn't normal. This forest was hungry. They sat for hours, or what felt like hours. Their watch was still frozen, the sun's position their only guide. They ate an energy bar, drank water from their bottle, tried to convince themselves that they were safe, that the thing was gone, that they could wait until dark and then. Then what? They didn't know. The trail was lost, the compass was useless, and the thing that hunted them knew these woods better than any human possibly could. They were trapped. The realization settled over them like a blanket, heavy and suffocating. They had walked into a trap. The note, the trail, the gift of the rabbit, it was all part of something larger, something that had been planned from the moment they'd opened their motel room door. But why? What did the thing want? If it had wanted to kill them, it could have done so a dozen times already in the night, outside the tent, on the trail when they were running. But it hadn't. It had herded them instead, driven them toward this clearing, this mine. What was in the mine? Alex looked at the shaft, at the darkness that breathed. They thought about descending, about climbing down that rotted ladder into the earth, about what they might find in the depths. They thought about staying here, about waiting for rescue that wouldn't come, about what would happen when night fell and the thing returned. They thought about running again, about plunging into the forest with no direction, no compass, no hope. None of the options were good. All of them ended in darkness. The afternoon passed slowly, the sun moving across the sky in a path that seemed wrong, too fast or too slow or too curved. Alex watched it, their hand on their knife, their eyes darting between the mine and the tree line and the sky. They were still watching when the shadow came. It was late afternoon, the light beginning to slant toward evening, when Alex noticed the darkness at the edge of the clearing. Not a shadow cast by the trees. This was different, deeper, a patch of night that existed in defiance of the sun. It moved. Alex watched it, frozen, as the darkness oozed across the clearing like spilled ink, flowing over grass and stone and rusted metal without distinction. It was heading toward them, they realized, moving with purpose, with hunger, with intent. They stood, their knife raised, knowing it was useless. The shadow was darkness itself, immune to blades, to light, to anything Alex could do. It reached them, flowing over their boots, their legs, their torso. They felt the cold then, a cold deeper than winter, a cold that reached into their bones and their blood and their soul. They opened their mouth to scream. And the shadow inhaled. Not their breath, not their body, something else. Something that Alex didn't know they had until it was being taken, pulled from their chest in a sensation that felt like drowning and burning and falling all at once. Their voice. They tried to scream again and nothing came out. They tried to speak, to whisper, to make any sound at all, and their throat was silent, their vocal cords frozen, their voice gone. The shadow retreated, flowing back across the clearing, taking their voice with it. It disappeared into the mine shaft, the darkness swallowing it, and Alex was left standing in the clearing, their mouth open in a scream that had no sound. They tried to speak, tried to shout, tried to whisper. Silence. Their voice was gone, taken, consumed by the shadow that had flowed from the mine. Alex stood in the clearing, their knife forgotten in their hand, their mind reeling. They had heard of skinwalkers. Everyone who grew up in the Southwest had heard the stories. Creatures that wore the skins of animals, that could mimic voices, that stole what was most precious from their victims. But they had never believed, not really, not until now. The thing in the mine, it wasn't just hunting them. It was feeding on them, taking pieces bit by bit. The fear first, then the voice. What would be next? Alex looked at the mine shaft, at the darkness that breathed. They understood now, understood what the thing wanted. It didn't want to kill them. Killing was too quick, too final. It wanted to consume them piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. And then it would wear their skin. The thought should have been terrifying, but Alex felt only a strange calm. They had been running for 6 months, running from the parking garage and the blood and the eyes. They had thought they were running from death, from danger, from the darkness in the city. But they had been running toward something else, toward this forest, this mine, this thing that wanted what they had. The note had been right. The trail knew what they were running from, and it had brought them here, to this place, to this moment. They had a choice. They could run again, deeper into the forest, deeper into the darkness. Or they could face what was in the mine, could descend into the earth and confront the thing that had taken their voice. Neither choice was good. Both ended in death. But one ended in death on their terms. Alex walked to the mine shaft, their boots crunching on rusted metal and stone. They looked down into the darkness, at the ladder that descended into the earth, at the void that waited below. They thought about the parking garage, about the blood, about the eyes that had met theirs in the moment before the end. They thought about running, about the 6 months of motels and back roads and fear. They thought about the note, about the ranger's warning, about the pendant that hung warm against their chest. They climbed down. The ladder was rotted, the rungs cracking under their weight, but it held. They descended slowly, their flashlight in one hand, their knife in the other, their heart hammering a rhythm that sounded like the cracking of bone. The darkness closed around them, thick and absolute. The air grew colder, damper, filled with the smell of metal and rot and something else, something that smelled like the rabbit, like the gift, like the offering that had been left outside their tent. They descended for what felt like hours, the ladder going down and down and down, deeper than any mine should go. The walls of the shaft were rough, unfinished, marked with symbols that Alex didn't recognize, spirals and circles and shapes that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of the eye. They reached the bottom. The tunnel was low, cramped, the ceiling pressing down with the weight of the mountain above. Alex crouched, their flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, revealing a passage that stretched ahead into blackness. They walked. The tunnel wound through the earth, branching and rejoining in patterns that made no sense. Alex kept to the main passage, their hand on the wall, their flashlight beam sweeping ahead for any sign of movement. They found the chamber by accident, stumbling into it when the floor dropped unexpectedly. It was large, larger than the tunnel should have allowed, a natural cavern that had been expanded by human hands. The walls were covered in symbols, the same spirals and circles that had marked the shaft, but larger, more elaborate, painted in colors that had faded to brown and black. Blood, Alex recognized it now. The symbols were painted in blood. In the center of the chamber there was a pit, and from the pit there came a sound. Breathing, the same breathing that Alex had heard from the mine shaft above, but closer now, more intimate. The sound of something large and hungry and patient, waiting in the dark. Alex approached the pit, their flashlight beam trembling. They looked down. Eyes looked back. Not human eyes, not animal eyes. Something else, something that existed in the space between that had no name in any human language. They were dark, depthless, filled with a hunger that had no end. And they were wearing Alex's face. The thing in the pit, it was wearing Alex's skin. Not a mask, not a disguise, but their actual skin, their face, their body. It looked up at them with their eyes, smiled at them with their mouth, raised their hand in a wave that was almost friendly. "Hello," it said, and the voice was Alex's voice, stolen and repurposed, coming from Alex's throat. "I've been waiting for you." Alex stumbled back, their knife raised, their mind reeling. The thing climbed from the pit, moving with Alex's gait, Alex's mannerisms, wearing Alex's body like a suit of clothes. "Don't be afraid," it said, and the words were Alex's words, the tone Alex's tone, the concern almost genuine. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want company." Alex shook their head, their mouth open in a scream that had no sound. "I know," the thing said, sympathetic. "I took your voice, I'm sorry, but I needed it. I need so many things, voices, faces, bodies. The hunger never stops." It approached and Alex backed away, their knife held ready. The thing, the skinwalker, paused, its head tilting in a gesture that was almost human. "You have a choice," it said. "You can run. I'll let you go back up the ladder, back into the forest. You can run until you find your way out, or until you die of exposure, or until something else finds you. Or—" It paused, its smile widening, showing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. "Or you can stay. Give me what I need. Your fear, your pain, your memories. Give me the thing you're running from, the thing in the parking garage, the blood and the eyes. Give me that and I'll let you go. I'll find another, someone else to wear, someone else to consume." Alex stared at it, at their own face twisted into an expression of hunger. They thought about the parking garage, about the blood, about the eyes that had met theirs in the moment before the end. They thought about the secret they had been carrying, the weight that had driven them across 3 states and 24 motels. They thought about the note, "It'll keep your secrets." Maybe that was true. Maybe the only way to be free was to give the secret away. Alex lowered their knife. The skinwalker's smile widened. "Yes," it whispered, "give it to me, give me everything." Alex closed their eyes and reached into themselves, into the darkness where the memory lived. They found it, the parking garage, the blood, the eyes, and they pulled it out, offered it up, threw it into the pit where the skinwalker waited. "Take it," they tried to say, but their voice was gone, the words silent. "Take it all." The skinwalker screamed. Not a scream of triumph, but of pain, of rejection, of something that had been offered and refused. It backed away, its form flickering, Alex's face dissolving into something else, something older and hungrier and more terrible. "No," it wailed, and the voice was no longer Alex's but something else, something that had never been human. Not that, I don't want that." Alex opened their eyes. The skinwalker was retreating, flowing back into the pit, its form losing coherence, becoming shadow and smoke and darkness. The chamber was shaking, the walls cracking, the symbols on the walls flaring with light that had no source. "Take it," Alex screamed, their voice returned, their words echoing in the chamber. "Take it and let me go." But the skinwalker was gone, vanished into the depths, leaving only the echo of its scream and the smell of ozone, and the feeling of something vast and angry turning its attention elsewhere. Alex ran. Up the tunnel, up the ladder, up through the mine shaft and into the clearing. The sun was setting, the light slanting through the trees in beams that seemed solid enough to touch. The forest was silent, the birds gone, the insects quiet. They ran through the trees, not caring about direction, not caring about the compass or the trail or the thing that might be following. They ran until their legs gave out, until they collapsed against a trunk, gasping for breath, their heart hammering against their ribs. And then they saw it. The trailhead. The old logging sign, the dirt road, the Subaru waiting where they had left it. They had run in a circle, or the forest had let them go, or something had guided them back. They didn't care. They stumbled to the car, their keys in their shaking hand, and started the engine. It caught on the first try, the check engine light glaring, the engine rough but running. They drove. Down the mountain, through the forest, onto the highway that led back to town. They didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't think about what they had seen or what they had done or what they had left behind in the mine. They just drove. The sun set as they reached the town, the neon signs flickering to life, the motel appearing around a curve like a promise or a threat. Alex pulled into the parking lot, the Subaru's engine dying with a final cough, and sat behind the wheel, their hands shaking, their breath coming in ragged gasps. They were out, they were safe, they were alive. But they weren't whole. They looked in the rearview mirror at their face, their eyes, their skin. It was theirs, they were sure of it. The skinwalker was gone, left behind in the mine, consumed by whatever they had thrown at it. But something was different, something was wrong. They blinked. Their reflection blinked back. Late. Just a fraction of a second, barely perceptible, but there. Alex blinked again, watching their reflection, and saw it again. The delay, the lag, the sense that what they were seeing wasn't quite synchronized with what they were doing. They looked away, their heart hammering. It was nothing, stress, fatigue, the aftereffects of trauma. It was nothing. They climbed out of the car, their legs unsteady, and walked to the motel office. The clerk was there, the same heavy-set man with the walrus mustache, and he looked up as Alex entered. "Evening," he said. "Room for the night." "I already have a room," Alex said. "Room 237. I've been here 3 nights." The clerk frowned, checking his computer. 237, No, that's not right. 237's been empty all week. "I was just there this morning. I got a note." "A note?" The clerk's frown deepened. "What kind of note?" Alex reached into their pocket, where the note should have been. It was gone. They checked their other pockets, their pack, their jacket. The note, the expensive paper, the elegant handwriting, the invitation to the trail, was nowhere to be found. Alex trailed off, their mind reeling. "I had a note. Someone slipped it under my door." "No one's been in 237 all week," the clerk repeated. "I would know. I'm the only one with keys." Alex stared at him, their heart hammering. "Then who?" "Look, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine." Alex's voice was automatic, the lie coming easily. "Just tired, long drive." "Sure." The clerk didn't look convinced. "Well, if you want a room, I got 237 available. Special rate since it's been empty." Alex looked at the door to the room where they had slept, where they had found the note, where their life had changed. They thought about going inside, about lying on the bed, about trying to sleep. They thought about the skinwalker, about the mine, about the shadow that had taken their voice. "No," they said, "I think I'll keep driving." "Suit yourself." The clerk shrugged, turning back to his computer. "Safe travels." Alex walked back to the car, their mind racing. The note was gone. The room was empty. The clerk didn't remember them. Had any of it happened? Had they imagined the trail, the mine, the skinwalker? Was this all some kind of breakdown, a psychotic episode brought on by stress and trauma? They looked at their hand, at the fingers that had touched the rabbit, that had felt its warmth. They looked at their jacket, at the tear where a branch had caught them during their flight through the forest. It had happened, it was real. But no one would believe them. No one could believe them. They got in the car and started the engine. It caught, rough and complaining, and they pulled out of the parking lot, onto the highway into the night. They would drive until they found somewhere safe, somewhere far from mountains and forests and things that wore skins, somewhere they could start over, forget the past, become someone new. They drove for hours, the miles disappearing under their wheels, the darkness pressing close against the windows. They passed through towns that were closed for the night, through landscapes that were empty and vast and indifferent. They drove until they couldn't drive anymore, until their eyes burned and their hands shook and their minds screamed for rest. They found a motel, different from the last one but the same in all the ways that mattered. Threadbare carpets, stained mattresses, the smell of industrial cleaner masking older, darker odors. They checked in, cash, fake name, the same routine as always. They climbed the stairs to their room, unlocked the door, stepped inside. And stopped. On the pillow, there was a note. Handwritten, expensive paper, elegant script. Alex approached it slowly, their heart hammering, their hand trembling as they reached for it. The message was simple. Thank you, next time bring a friend. No signature, no explanation. Just the words and the knowledge that it wasn't over, would never be over, that the thing in the mine was still hungry and still waiting and still wearing Alex's face. They looked in the mirror above the dresser, at their reflection, at their eyes. They blinked. Their reflection blinked back. On time. But the smile was wrong. Too wide, too sharp, too hungry. Alex spun around, but the room was empty. Just them, just the note, just the darkness pressing close against the windows. They turned back to the mirror. Their reflection was still smiling. And behind it, in the darkness of the room, something moved. Alex didn't sleep that night. They sat in the chair by the window, their eyes fixed on the door, their hand clutching the knife that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. The note lay on the bed where they'd thrown it, the expensive paper catching the light from the parking lot outside, the words seeming to pulse with their own dark energy. Thank you, next time bring a friend. The skinwalker knew where they were, had always known. The running, the driving, the hundreds of miles between the mine and this motel, none of it mattered. The thing had marked them, claimed them, woven itself into their existence in ways that distance couldn't sever. Alex thought about the reflection in the mirror, about the smile that wasn't theirs. They thought about the movement in the darkness behind the glass, the thing that had been watching from the other side. They thought about the parking garage. 6 months ago, the city, the job that Alex had hated, the apartment that was too small, the life that felt like a cage. Alex had stayed late at the office, working on a project that didn't matter, and when they'd finally left, the parking garage was empty. Almost empty. There had been a man, or something that looked like a man, standing by Alex's car, his back turned, his posture wrong in ways that Alex couldn't define. Alex had approached cautiously, keys in hand, ready to run. The thing had turned. Its face, Alex couldn't remember its face, not clearly. Just the eyes. The eyes that weren't human, that were too dark, too deep, too hungry. The eyes that had looked at Alex and seen something worth taking. Then the blood. So much blood. The thing had moved, faster than anything should move, and the security guard, the poor security guard who had been making his rounds, had been between Alex and the exit. Alex had seen it happen, had watched the thing open the guard up like a biology textbook, had seen the organs arranged in patterns that suggested something more than simple murder. The thing had looked at Alex then, its mouth full of blood, and it had smiled, not with triumph but with recognition, with invitation. Run, it had said, and the voice was the guard's voice, stolen and repurposed. Run and I'll follow. Alex had run, through the garage, up the stairs, out into the night. They had driven for hours, not stopping, not thinking, just moving. They had crossed state lines before dawn, had ditched their phone, their credit cards, their identity. They had become someone else, a ghost haunting the back roads and cheap motels of America. And they had thought they were safe. But they weren't safe. They had never been safe. The thing from the garage had followed or called or sent something else in its place. The skinwalker in the mine, it was connected, Alex knew it. The same hunger, the same wearing of faces, the same game of chase and consume. They were being hunted by something that didn't die, that didn't forget, that had all the time in the world. The night passed slowly, the darkness pressing against the window like a physical thing. Alex didn't move, didn't sleep, didn't even blink for minutes at a time. They just watched and waited and tried to remember what it felt like to be safe. Dawn came eventually, gray and cold, the sun hidden behind clouds that promised rain. Alex stood, their joints stiff, their eyes burning, and looked at the note one more time. Next time, bring a friend. There wouldn't be a next time. Alex wouldn't let there be a next time. They would run again, farther this time, deeper into the country, somewhere the thing couldn't follow. Alaska, maybe, or Canada, somewhere with cold and distance and space to hide. They packed quickly, shoving their few possessions into their pack, not bothering with the complimentary coffee or the continental breakfast. They checked out at the front desk. The clerk, a different clerk this time, a young woman with dyed hair and a nose ring, barely looking up from her phone. "Have a good day," she said, the words automatic. Alex didn't answer. They walked out to the car, their keys in their hand, their eyes scanning the parking lot for anything that didn't belong. The car was waiting, patient and unreliable. Alex climbed in, started the engine, pulled out onto the highway. They drove north. The miles passed in a blur of gray sky and wet pavement, the windshield wipers beating a rhythm that matched Alex's heart. They passed through towns that were barely there, through landscapes that were empty and vast and indifferent. They drove until they couldn't drive anymore, until their eyes burned and their hands shook and their minds screamed for rest. They found a rest stop, a concrete island in a sea of trees, and pulled in. The bathroom was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing and flickering. Alex splashed water on their face, looked in the mirror. Their reflection looked back. It blinked. On time. But the eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep, too hungry. The same eyes from the parking garage, from the mine, from the mirror in the motel room. Alex stumbled back, their hand reaching for the knife that wasn't there. They had left it in the car, stupid, careless, a mistake that might cost them everything. The reflection smiled. "Hello," it said, and the voice was Alex's voice, but the words were wrong, the cadence off, the hunger palpable. "I've missed you." Alex ran. Out of the bathroom, out of the rest stop, into the rain that was falling now, hard and cold and stinging. They ran to the car, fumbled for their keys, dropped them, picked them up, dropped them again. "Alex," the voice came from behind them, from the bathroom door, from the darkness that seemed to be gathering despite the daylight. "Don't run. We need to talk." Alex found the keys, unlocked the door, climbed in. The engine caught on the first try, a small miracle, and they peeled out of the rest stop, tires squealing on wet pavement. They didn't look back. They couldn't. They just drove faster than they should have, the speedometer climbing, the rain making visibility almost zero. They drove until they couldn't drive anymore, until they missed a turn and found themselves on a road that wasn't on any map, in a forest that seemed to have no end. The trees closed in around them, the branches reaching across the road like fingers. The rain intensified, becoming something almost solid, a wall of water that made driving impossible. Alex stopped the car. They sat, their hands on the wheel, their breath coming in ragged gasps. They were trapped. The thing had herded them again, driven them to this place, this moment. There was no escape, no running, no hiding. There was only the choice they had made in the mine, the choice to give up their secret, to throw their trauma into the darkness. But it hadn't worked. The skinwalker had refused it, had screamed and retreated, but it hadn't taken the memory. It was still there in Alex's mind, the parking garage and the blood and the eyes. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the thing didn't want the memory. Maybe it wanted Alex to keep it, to carry it, to be defined by it. Maybe the running was the point, the fear, the constant looking over the shoulder. Maybe Alex was the prey, and the hunt was the purpose, and there would never be an end. They sat in the car, the rain drumming on the roof, the darkness pressing close against the windows. They thought about getting out, about walking into the forest, about letting the thing take them. At least it would be over. At least the running would stop. But they couldn't do it. Something in them, some stubborn spark of survival, some refusal to surrender, kept them in the seat, kept their hand on the wheel, kept their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. They would fight, they would run, they would do whatever it took to survive. The rain slowed, then stopped. The clouds parted, revealing a sky that was the wrong color, too dark, too close, too hungry. The forest was silent, the birds gone, the insects quiet. Alex started the car. The engine caught, rough and complaining, and they drove forward, deeper into the forest, deeper into the darkness. They would find a way out. They had to. The road wound through the trees, the pavement giving way to dirt, the dirt giving way to gravel, the gravel giving way to nothing. Alex drove until the wheels spun uselessly, until the car was stuck in mud that seemed almost deliberate. They climbed out, their boots sinking into the muck. The forest was dark, the trees massive, their branches reaching across the narrow space to form a tunnel of shadow. Alex walked. They didn't know where they were going, didn't have a plan, a destination, a hope. They just walked, one foot in front of the other, moving because stopping meant dying. The forest changed around them. The trees grew older, their trunks wider, their branches more twisted. The air grew colder, their breath fogging, their skin prickling with gooseflesh. They walked until they couldn't walk anymore, until they collapsed against a trunk, gasping for breath, their heart hammering against their ribs. And then they heard it. The sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving through the forest with purpose, not running, not chasing, just walking, coming closer. Alex stood, their knife in their hand, when had they grabbed it? They didn't remember and faced the direction of the sound. The thing emerged from the trees. It was wearing Alex's face. Of course it was. The skinwalker had found them, had followed them, had been waiting for this moment. But something was different. The face was Alex's, yes, but older, more worn. The eyes were tired, the mouth set in a line of grim determination. "Hello," it said, and the voice was Alex's voice, but the tone was wrong. Not hungry, not predatory, something else. "What do you want?" Alex asked, their own voice shaking. "To help you." The skinwalker, the thing wearing Alex's face, stepped closer, its hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I've been watching you, following you, and I think I understand now." "Understand what?" "Why you ran, what you're running from." The thing's eyes, Alex's eyes, were sad, almost sympathetic. The parking garage, the blood, the thing that killed the guard. Alex felt the cold settle into their chest. "How do you know about that?" "Because I was there." The skinwalker smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Not me exactly, but one of us. We're connected, all the skinwalkers, all the things that wear faces. We share things, memories, hunger." You're not the one from the mine." "No," the thing shook its head. "That one is. Younger, hungrier, less. Understanding. It wanted to consume you, to wear you, to become you. But I want something else." "What?" "To help you stop running." The skinwalker stepped closer, close enough to touch, close enough to smell. It smelled like Alex, like sweat and fear and the particular scent of skin that had been worn too long. "The thing in the parking garage, it's still out there, still hunting, and it won't stop until it has you." "Then what do I do?" "You stop running." The skinwalker's hand reached out, touched Alex's shoulder. The touch was cold, wrong, but not painful. "You turn around, you face it, you give it what it wants." "And what does it want?" "The same thing all of us want." The skinwalker's eyes met Alex's, and in their depths, Alex saw something that might have been truth. To be seen, to be known, to be real. Alex stared at it, at their own face twisted into an expression of need. "You're saying I should just let it take me?" "No," the skinwalker shook its head. "I'm saying you should stop running from what happened, accept it, integrate it, make it part of who you are. The thing in the garage, it feeds on fear, on denial, on the refusal to accept reality. If you stop running, if you turn and face it, it loses its power. And then you live. The skinwalker smiled, and this time there was warmth in it, a genuine affection that Alex didn't know how to process. You live and you remember and you carry the weight. That's all any of us can do. Alex looked at the thing wearing their face, at the eyes that were too dark and too deep and too hungry. They thought about the parking garage, about the blood, about the eyes that had looked at them and seen something worth taking. They thought about running, about the 6 months of motels and back roads in fear. They thought about the note, "It'll keep your secrets." "You're lying," Alex said. "You're trying to trick me, to get me to lower my guard." Maybe, the skinwalker didn't deny it. Or maybe I'm telling the truth. Maybe I'm tired of the hunt, tired of the hunger, tired of being a monster. Maybe I want to help someone just once before I forget what helping means. And if I believe you, then you turn around, you go back to the city, you face the thing in the garage, and you stop running. And if I don't believe you, then you keep running. The skinwalker stepped back, fading into the shadows. And I'll keep following, not because I want to hurt you, but because you're interesting, because you're different, because you ran for 6 months and didn't break, and I want to see how long you can keep going. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. The skinwalker's voice came from the darkness, disembodied now, the face lost in shadow. It's just the truth. Alex stood alone in the forest, their knife in their hand, their heart hammering. They thought about the choice before them, believe the thing or don't, turn around or keep running. They thought about the parking garage. And they made their decision. Alex walked out of the forest. It took hours or days. Time had become fluid, unreliable, measured in footsteps rather than minutes. They followed the sun, or what they thought was the sun, through trees that gradually became younger, smaller, less twisted. The air grew warmer, their breath no longer fogging, their steps becoming more confident. They found a road eventually, then a highway, then a town with a gas station and a pay phone. They called a cab, used their last cash, rode in silence to a bus station. They bought a ticket south, back to the city, back to the parking garage, back to the thing that had started all of this. The bus ride was long, uncomfortable, filled with strangers who smelled of sweat and fast food and desperation. Alex sat by the window, their forehead against the glass, watching the landscape change from forest to farmland to suburb to city. They thought about the skinwalker's words, about stopping the running, about facing what they had been avoiding. They didn't know if they believed it, didn't know if the thing had been telling the truth or manipulating them or simply playing a different kind of game. But they knew one thing: they were tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being afraid. If this was the end, so be it. At least it would be on their terms. The city appeared on the horizon, a jagged line of concrete and glass that seemed to pulse with its own energy. Alex felt their stomach clench, their hands start to shake. This was where it had happened. This was where the guard had died, where the blood had pooled, where the eyes had met theirs and seen something worth taking. The bus pulled into the station, and Alex stepped out into air that smelled of exhaust and asphalt and the particular scent of urban decay. They walked through streets that were familiar and foreign at the same time, past buildings that they had passed 100 times before but couldn't quite remember. They found the parking garage. It was still there, unchanged, the same concrete structure that had haunted their dreams for 6 months. The entrance was open, the barrier arm raised, the interior dark and inviting. Alex stood at the entrance, their heart hammering, their breath coming in short gasps. They could turn around, could find another way, another solution, another path. But they didn't. They walked in. The garage was empty, or nearly empty. A few scattered cars, a few fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of oil and concrete and something else. something that had been waiting. Alex walked to the spot where it had happened. The blood was long gone, cleaned up by professionals who had probably seen worse, but Alex could still see it, still smell it, still feel the moment when the thing had turned, when the eyes had met theirs, when the world had changed. "You're back." The voice came from behind them, from the shadows, from the darkness that seemed to gather in the corners of the garage. Alex turned slowly, their hand reaching for the knife that wasn't there. They had lost it somewhere, in the forest or on the bus or in the station. The thing stepped into the light. It was different from the skinwalker. Where the skinwalker had worn Alex's face, this thing wore no face at all. It was a shape, a presence, a hunger given form. It shifted as Alex watched, becoming first a man, then a woman, then something that was neither, something that was older and hungrier and more terrible. "I knew you'd come back," it said, and the voice was the guard's voice, stolen and repurposed. "They always come back. The running is just foreplay. The anticipation makes the meal sweeter." "I'm not here to be eaten," Alex said, and their voice was steady, surprisingly so. "No," the thing smiled, and the smile was too wide, too sharp, too hungry. "Then why are you here?" "To make a deal." The thing laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming metal. "A deal with me? You must be desperate." "Maybe." Alex stepped closer, close enough to smell the thing, the smell of rot and ozone and something else, something that reminded them of the mine, of the skinwalker, of the forest. "But I have something you want." "And what's that?" "My fear." Alex held out their hands, palms up, a gesture of offering. "My guilt, my trauma, the memory of what happened here, what I saw, what I ran from. You can have it, all of it." The thing's smile faltered. "You would give me that?" "I would trade it." Alex met the thing's eyes, those terrible, hungry eyes, and didn't flinch. "My fear for my freedom, my trauma for my life. You take what I saw, what I felt, what I've been carrying, and you let me go. You never follow me again. You never hunt me again. You forget I ever existed." "And if I refuse?" "Then you get nothing." Alex's voice was firm, the voice of someone who had nothing left to lose. "I'll fight you. I'll scream. I'll make so much noise that someone will come and you'll have to run or hide or kill them too. And then you'll have another body, another witness, another thread to follow, but you won't have me." The thing was silent, studying Alex with eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone and into the soul beneath. "You're different," it said finally. "The others, they beg, they cry, they offer anything, everything, if only I'll let them go. But you're offering me your pain, your darkness, as if it's something valuable." "It is valuable." Alex stepped closer still, close enough to touch, close enough to be touched. "It's been feeding you for 6 months. Every time I woke up screaming, every time I flinched at a shadow, every time I ran, you felt it. You fed on it. My fear has been your food, my trauma your wine, and now I'm offering you the source. The memory itself. Take it and feast forever, or refuse and starve." The thing reached out its hand, when had it grown hands, touching Alex's forehead. The touch was cold, wrong, but Alex didn't pull away. They stood their ground, their eyes open, their mind clear. "Show me," the thing whispered. And Alex showed them. The parking garage, the late night, the empty space, the man who wasn't a man standing by the car, his back turned, his posture wrong. The turn, the eyes, the hunger. The security guard making his rounds, whistling a tune that Alex would never forget. The thing moving, faster than thought, faster than fear. The blood, so much blood, painting the concrete in patterns that suggested something ancient and hungry. The eyes meeting Alex's, the smile, the voice. "Run!" And Alex running through the garage, up the stairs, out into the night. The driving, the hiding, the becoming someone else. The motels, the back roads, the constant looking over the shoulder. The note, the trail, the mine. The skinwalker, wearing Alex's face, offering help or harm or something in between. The choice, the return, this moment. Alex gave it all, poured it out, offered it up like a sacrifice. The fear, the guilt, the shame, the running. The memory of blood on concrete, of eyes that weren't eyes, of a hunger that had no end. The thing took it, inhaled it, consumed it. And screamed. Not a scream of triumph, but of pain, of rejection, of something that had been offered and refused. It backed away, its form flickering, losing coherence, becoming shadow and smoke and darkness. No, it wailed, and the voice was no longer the guards, but something else, something that had never been human. Not this, I don't want this. Take it, Alex said, their voice steady, their eyes clear. Take it all. But the thing was gone, vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echo of its scream and the smell of ozone and the feeling of something vast and angry turning its attention elsewhere. Alex stood alone in the parking garage, their heart hammering, their breath coming in ragged gasps. They waited for the fear to return, for the trauma to crash over them like a wave, for the memory of blood to overwhelm them. But it didn't come. The memory was gone, the fear was gone. The thing in the garage had taken it, consumed it, made it part of itself, and now Alex was free. They walked out of the garage into the night, into the city that suddenly seemed brighter, cleaner, more real. They walked until they found a bench, and they sat, and they looked at their hands. They were shaking, but not with fear, with relief, with release, with the sudden, overwhelming realization that they were no longer running. They didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if the thing would return, if the skinwalker would find them, if the darkness would follow them from the garage or the mine or the forest. But for now, in this moment, they were free. They stood, stretched, looked up at the sky. The stars were visible, bright and cold and utterly indifferent. The city hummed around them, alive and vast and full of possibilities. Alex walked. They found a hotel, not a motel, but a real hotel, with clean sheets and room service and a view of the city. They checked in with their real name, used a credit card that they had thought was dead, climbed into a bed that was soft and warm and safe. They slept. And for the first time in 6 months, they didn't dream of blood. The morning came bright and clear, the sun streaming through windows that weren't covered in grime. Alex woke slowly, luxuriously, their body remembering what it felt like to rest. They showered. They ate breakfast, real food, not energy bars and fast food. They looked in the mirror. Their reflection looked back. It blinked. On time. No delay, no lag, no smile that was too wide, too sharp, too hungry. Just Alex, just themselves, just free. They dressed, checked out, walked into the city. They didn't know where they were going, didn't have a plan, didn't care. They were alive, they were free, they were themselves again. They walked until they found a park, a green space in the concrete jungle, and sat on a bench to watch the world go by. People passed, joggers, dog walkers, business people on their way to somewhere important. No one looked at Alex twice. No one saw the darkness that had followed them, the fear that had defined them, the trauma that had consumed them. It was over. Or so they thought. The note appeared on the bench beside them, slipped there by hands they didn't see. Expensive paper, elegant handwriting. Alex picked it up, their heart hammering, their hands shaking. Thank you, it read. The meal was unexpected, delicious, but incomplete. You gave me your fear, your trauma, your memory. But you kept something back, something essential, yourself, your soul, your essence. Alex felt the cold settle into their chest. Next time, the note continued, I won't be so easily fooled. Next time I'll take everything, and there will be a next time, there always is. No signature, no explanation, just the words and the knowledge that it wasn't over, would never be over, that the thing in the garage was still hungry and still waiting and still wearing faces. Alex looked around the park at the people passing by, at the trees and the grass and the sky. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. But somewhere in the shadows between the trees, something was watching. Something was waiting. Something was hungry. Alex stood, the note crumpled in their hand. They walked out of the park, into the city, into the light. They didn't run, not this time. They walked, their head high, their steps steady. Let it follow, let it watch, let it wait. They were free, they were alive, they were themselves. And they would be ready. The city swallowed them, the crowds parting and closing around them like water. The note was gone, dropped in a trash can, forgotten. The memory was gone, consumed by the thing in the garage. But the knowledge remained, the understanding, the truth that the world was darker and hungrier than they had ever imagined, and that there were things in the shadows that wanted what they had. Alex walked on, into the light, into the future. And behind them, in the darkness, something smiled. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, please leave a like and subscribe.